a weekly, well, maybe weekly show from here on out. So I'm Queen Alexa. I run the political shit show. That's Brittany. She runs Politically Provoked. And we're going to be doing these shows that will range from everywhere from controversial to probably controversial and more controversial things. That will obviously get us or me in a lot of trouble. That's kind of the plan that we're doing here. So I'll let Brittany tell you what the topics are. So take it away.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, well, why don't we let everybody introduce themselves first, and then we can talk about the topics. So, why don't I start from the top? Big Tag, Big Black, whatever you want to go by tonight. Introduce yourself.
BBT.
BBT. Okay. All right, John. Why don't you? All right. You are.
I'm John. I used to do a bunch of Instagram stuff, so people may know me from that. I think a few people in the chat mentioned that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm generally right wing, so this should be fun. Look forward to a good discussion.
Cool. Quentin.
Yeah, I guess I'm Quentin. I don't really have much to shill, but just doing pop-ons because they're fun. Got invited. See what happens.
Oh, Mythic.
Hey there, I'm Mythic. You can find me at bigblack@bigtech.com or whatever the fuck. And I normally do political conspiracy type stuff. I'm very pleased to be invited here on whatever this is. What is this show even called? I'm not even sure. The Political Shit Show YouTube iteration?
We're just figure it out right now. We're just playing.
Yeah, this is the first show, so we're gonna figure it out.
These are our guinea pigs.
Happy to be here. It's Mythic Politics on everything.
Okay, somebody online.
Fantastic. I love being on pilot shows. I am somebody online on Twitter. I'm some dummy online. Today's my first day being on YouTube. Mm-hmm. Hooray. I'm normally over on Twitch. You guys can find me there. Somebody online on Twitch. I like to talk about politics. I like to do interesting panels. Tomorrow we're talking about what money is and what the heck it's for and why we use it. Last week we talked about toxic masculinity and what exactly it is and who's doing it and how we stop it if that's something we're supposed to do. Spoiler alert, we changed the word entirely and we talked about toxic dominance and toxic submissivity, but we'll get to that later. I do radical anti-centrism. I hang out in the middle and tell people to just mellow out most of the time, but we'll get into that later, I'm sure.
And like we said, we are waiting on one other person, but Kevin can just hop in when he is ready. And yeah, so we're going to do two topics. I don't know which one we should start with, but we're going to talk about, I guess Alexa was telling me that there was a poll that was put out. I don't know if you want to tell them about the poll, Alexa.
Yeah, there was a study that came out that was saying that 30% of the Republican Party view that 80% of the Democrats are evil, and then 20% of the Republican Party believe that almost 90% of the Democrats are not human. This also seemed to similarly track with how the left viewed the right by those same numbers. So what do you think is the main cause of this, and your general thoughts on the idea that like one side or the other is like less than human or pure evil?
I mean, and it's happening also like just with political enemies that people make. People are just kind of moving past okay, I disagree with them, this person is evil. So we can kind of just go into that and give our thoughts. I want to start with Mythic because I just feel like it.
I have no idea what to make of that poll. I would have to look at it. Like it seems in line with some weirdo QAnon bullshit to think that people are literally like non-human agents. I have no idea. I don't know what's well. It's because of the impotent and the shared cuck nature. Look, the Republicans and the Democrats are both neoliberal parties. The only differentiation is some fringe social wedge issues. So in that vein, where I think that there's a legislative logjam in Congress now. So effectively, all you can do is do campaigning on exacerbating people's passions, and as a result, we have this stymied thing where people are focusing just on what excites the passions and not anything that's useful or beneficial, anything that's legislatively actionable. That's all out the window. The back in the day, when we had big ambitious things to look forward to, whether you agreed with them or not, such as the civil rights movement, and I don't know, even like the EPA under Nixon. I think that the mechanisms by which we would even do policy like that is dead. So all that's left is vitriolic stuff, and as a result, politicians are just whipping people into a froth And it's led to this stratification and polarization between the constituents of both parties, I think.
Okay. I don't know. I want to go to John.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen just from like general like data that's come out from like Pew and such that there's like increased polarization in like people's views. Like people are starting to trend towards more radical views, right? So like the right wing people are becoming more close to like what we would call like the alt right, and then like lefties are becoming like more communist, socialist over time. Where it felt like in the past, most people were pretty much just centrists. So when you have that level of polarization and you have so many means of communication, and like the media, like the growth in media, there's like a 24/7 news cycle now. It makes sense that people start to view the opposite side as like evil, right? And they're also having their ideas constantly being reinforced by all these different like social media, like group chats, maybe like Discord servers, things like that. So yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense that they're viewing each other as evil. I also want to see the poll because I don't understand how people were saying that like Democrats are not humans. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, I need to see the poll too, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean,
I think Lex
what
said
are they
that they
like?
saw it on Fox News or something.
Yeah, it was a Fox
Yeah.
News article, but they were saying that both sides were tracking a similar belief that like there was like a group within the Republican Party and the Democrat Party that viewed the other side as not human.
That's crazy. I guess they think because like their morality is so bad that they're
Yeah,
subhuman
they're
or
saying that like
something.
they're less than human. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. But yeah, I mean that makes sense when you constantly have your ideas reinforced. I think this goes for both sides that you start to view the out group as worse and worse because you're not really talking to them as much. So you don't really understand where they're coming from, right? And I think like that's why things like this are pretty important because we can have like people who disagree talk it out, and I feel like you kind of view the other side better when you understand where they're coming from, even if you still think they're just completely incorrect.
So, like, this is my whole shtick. I do this thing on my server called a Bohm Dialogue, where the primary goal is radical empathy and trying to non-judgmentally understand where the other person is coming from. There is this tendency in modern media, and again, it has to do with the 24-hour news cycle, but also has to do with the continued polarization that occurs in our politics, generally speaking. Like, it appears that at some point in the relative recent history, when I say relative recent history, I'm talking on the scale of thousands of years, it got to the point where people started having a different idea of what was objectively true and started operating under different assumptions about the way that reality functions. As a result of that, everybody that has the same shared understanding of the way that reality works are working together on the same base assumptions on the way that they think that they need to fix society. And the other group of people have a different set of assumptions on the base level that the way that society functions or the way that reality works, and they're trying to move in the direction that they think is functional. And the idea of listening to someone that disagrees with the way that you understand reality to function is absolute pure insanity. And so there is this emphasis on don't ever listen to anybody that disagrees with you in any way, or else they might corrupt your brain with their evil brain waves and get you to think all of the bad thoughts that you're not supposed to have. And we need to all kind of stop doing that, listen to the people and go, wait a minute, that sounds abhorrent to me. Explain it to me a little bit better so that you don't sound like a frickin' monster, because I'm sure that you're not. You look like a person, but it's like a personal choice that we need to make that society isn't motivating people to do. Instead, we're incentivized to go to the max and never compromise.
I guess we
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the kind of like split that we're seeing in the American population is because like there has been a divergence in the like fundamental bedrock views of both of these sides. Like you could say that the left is more willing to embrace nihilism, whereas the right, know it or not, are not nihilistic. Because a lot of them are broadly Christians. And so it's a similar kind of things like the revolutionary v counter-revolutionary. There's I don't know if there's much to reconcile, especially in this absurd society we're living in, because in this kind of situation with this societal breakdown that we're experiencing, people will go further into their sides and find less common ground. I think that's that.
I think that it's a little bit disingenuous to say that like the right has a monopoly on the idea of, well, we are all Christian. Like there is more of a sense of on the right everybody thinks
Wait,
that
hold on,
they
hold
are
on,
all
hold
the
on,
same
hold on, hold on, hold
denomination.
on. Did Big Tech give his opening statement?
Yeah, a big Tekken.
Oh, my
No.
bad.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay,
Yeah,
yeah. Let's
excuse
have
me.
Big
I
Tech.
had to step
Maybe
away
I'll
to
be
grab
back.
a phone call real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll weigh in. I think you guys are all on the right track as far as I can tell, but I would say that there actually is a right way to view the way that reality works, to refer to what you said before. And this might be the hardline disagreement where some people might say, oh, we need to hear both sides and weigh both sides, and that's valid. But at the end of the day, people on my side see people on your side as fundamentally evil, because the distinction between good and evil for us, speaking as a Christian, regardless of denomination, is that good is in alignment with God's way and evil is in rebellion against God's way. Like that's the oldest story in the book, is that literally Lucifer rebelled against God's way. And so there is, to us, that's what the left is. The left is an attempt to rebel and to invert and to deny God's right way. That's what the leftist agenda is. So it is fundamentally evil.
Okay, somebody go. Now the floor is open. Then somebody go
Thank
first.
you so much. Like that's exactly the point that I was trying to like lean on. Potentially on the right, we do see a type of unification of this concept that we are the Christians, but there are a lot more people that are Christian on the left than what I think a lot of people like recognize and acknowledge. And I think that there are a lot more people on the right that might not necessarily be the traditional fundamentalist evangelical Christian that is the normal idea of what someone might think of as Christian. I am an anthropologist and I've studied theology, and I'm really interested in the different sectarian views, and I do think that people on the left are a little bit more upfront in trying to like acknowledge, okay, what is the specific denomination of Christianity that I exist within, whereas people on the right are trying to say, well, no, we are a homogenous group that all believe the exact same things, and ignore the like little minor differences about what they may believe is different about different things, but instead rally around these are the things that we do agree about, and then kind of create an exclusionary boundary around the outside of it.
Well, I'll say this as a Catholic, you have to look at for at least like the left-wing followers of Catholicism or Christianity more broadly, is the faith in line with what they're pushing, or are they Christians but pushing against the view of the church? And I would say that a lot of current goals for leftists are like diametrically opposed to that of the church.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you see like the left supports things like homosexual marriage, they support like trans surgery, things like that. They support abortion as well. I think abortion's a really big one, where it's like it's very clear in pretty much every Christian denomination, save a few, that those are things that are against God's will, right? So I feel like a lot of these like leftist Christians, if they're pushing those things, they're pushing things that are against what they're actually supposed to believe in. And I don't think you can truly call those people Christians. And I think, I mean, this is very evident in Catholicism. When you look at, I don't know how much you guys know about theology, but there's, or like the Catholic Church in general, but there's like two main forms of the Mass. There's the Novus Ordo, and then there's the traditional Latin Mass. And people who tend to attend the Novus Ordo Mass, they like most of them support abortion, but then when you look at the traditional Latin Mass, only like less than 1% of the people who tend to attend that Mass support abortion. So I think a lot of it is that the people on the left who are Christians aren't truly following their faith, and I think that the Christian faith really belongs on the right, at least with how they view like different social issues.
If I had the right to reply, I mean, you went off of my statement, and I think I'd like to clarify a couple terms. We're using the word denomination over and over here, and I'm not sure everybody knows what that means, but it literally means a removed autonomous no-name branch. So really, referring to what I said before, if evil is a rebellion and a breaking away from God's right way, then even a denomination in itself is a form of rebellion against the universal church, which Catholic meaning universal. So any denomination is in itself a sectarian rebellion against the unity. And Protestantism itself is a protest against the unity of the church. So what we have is a fundamental schismatic issue going on within Christianity itself. Christianity being Christ-likeness, and the church being the unified, universal church. When we have schismatic denominations happening all over the place, we're essentially all of this is leftist action. It's all a left leaning. These are rebellious breakaways. They are protests against God's way.
So
What we need is a healing of the schisms and a reunification of the universal church. And he referred to Novus Ordo, which means the new order. The new order isn't the old order. I mean, it's right there in the name. So again, here we are, trad cath. What we're talking about is traditional universal church. And that's what needs to be restored so that we can get back to a traditional conservatism, which is Christianity in God's right way.
I completely agree with you, and I'm glad that you brought up the Protestant schism that occurred where we originally went away from Catholicism. But I do want to point out all of the people that we excluded when they became Catholicism. We need to reattach to the Orthodox, and we can't forget about the Gnostics while we're at it. And really, we should be reconstituting with the Jewish faith and realigning all of the Jewish tribes. And we need to remember that we're talking about the God of Abraham at the end of the day. So all of the Islamic religions are all technically talking about the same deity also.
No, this is obfuscation.
Some point, we need to go, okay, whose interpretation of the word are we going by, and whose decision are we going by? And frankly, the Constitution doesn't reference the Bible one bit or give any authority to the Bible. The United States of America's legal system doesn't have any basis on it.
The Constitution isn't the Bible.
That's my point.
The Constitution is an illuminist liberal document in itself.
So is Christianity anti-American, or is America anti-Christian? I guess is my question based on that.
No, America is a Christian nation.
The tradition of Christianity is always to baptize, sanctify, and Christianize worldly institutions. So America itself is Christianized by the Christians within it. It's not a Christian institution in and of itself. It's an illuminist Freemasonic institution. It's essentially a satanic. The Statue of Liberty might as well be the statue of Lucifer. But we are to Christianize the land that we dwell in. That's what Christians do, traditionally.
I don't know how this became an internecine doctrinaire conversation about the different factions.
It's possible to turn up your mic, Mythic Politics. I can hear everybody else except for you.
Yeah, that's not really up to me. I mean, I have it peaked.
No, it is. It's on your end because I did turn you up.
Yeah, I turned you up all the way.
Yeah, it's
crank you up in Discord.
You sound better right now.
Oh, yeah, I don't know why that is.
You're super quiet.
Yeah, what the fuck? Okay, let me work on this.
Okay.
Okay. Well, what I'd say is that America was a Christian nation foundationally, because while you might not be able to find direct references in the legal documents, there are troves of Federalist Papers that these documents were made with a certain religious context, or within a certain historical context, and the state was set out for a moral and religious people. These documents were made for a moral and religious people.
True.
I do think that it's good that we've come down to the answer to the original question, why is there so much division? There is a theocratic and dogmatic difference. You guys are under the impression that, hey, we all need to conform to the same religious ideology or else we can't coexist in the country and come to a common consensus, whereas people on the left are trying to come to a more common consensus. And there are a lot of people on the left that aren't. And again, that's why I don't buy into the left. I'm trying to get people to come to the center and have a more mutual understanding and more accepting, tolerant understanding of people around them. But again, if we're all under the impression that if you don't believe the same thing that I believe, we can't possibly accomplish a common goal, we're immediately going to have to start off with a war and then build from there. And that's not a functional way to build societies.
Yeah, well, I think it's also important to realize that when you when you have like all these like theological differences, right, that also leads to differences in the moral fabric of the country. So, sure, it's possible to have a country with like multiple religions, that includes like atheism as well. But the moral fabric should be relatively uniform among the country. Because if you take like a trad Catholic person and take, your average everyday atheist, there is like diametric opposition in the way in which they view morals. So in order to have a country that works, you do need that generally accepted moral fabric. And we had that for a very long time because we were incredibly Christian. We were Protestant, but still we had, generally a good moral fabric. And we're starting to lose that now, but there's still people who want to maintain that. And that's where we're having a great amount of opposition. So I think it's important that maybe not have the same religion, but I think we want to have a similar moral fabric in the country, a similar moral basis that we can work off of, upon which we can enact laws and such. Mm-hmm. For sure.
States in the first frickin' place was because everybody was like, hey, we want to practice our religion in a way that the king and the Church of England says that we're not supposed to do it. We're tired of them being Protestant but practicing under the Anglican Church, and so we're going to go to America where we can set up our own individual colonies, and each individual colony can have their own way of doing things, and the Mennonites can go be Mennonites, and the Amish people can go be Amish people, and the Pilgrims can come and be Pilgrims, and then you can have Joseph Smith go and create the entire LDS Church, and everybody can coexist wonderfully and happily in this new world that we live in. And frankly, maybe even people that don't
Smith
have...
and chased the Mormons to Utah.
Okay, and then we incorporated them back into the United States, and they are lovingly embraced by the right all the time as being traditional Christians, regardless of like who reads the sequel to the Bible and doesn't.
I think to bring it back to the kind of like fundamental split, you can say that a lot of liberals or left-wing people, like, what is the like bedrock, like where did they come from? And you could say the Enlightenment from the French Revolution. You could say a lot of the modern day like ideologies sprout from that like one point. You have because they're all materialist in nature. You have communism, liberalism, fascism. These are all rejections of God. I mean, that was like pretty explicit with the French Revolution. So I think that this abandonment of God and nihilism that replaces it is what like characterizes a lot of these modernist and you could say like liberal movements that we see today.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. You go for it.
As far as sectarianism and different denominational beliefs go, there's two different questions, and the main ones are like, are all these different versions of Christians receiving salvation? That's a question for Christians to grapple with, and there's different opinions. But the one that concerns us on the political level is going back to what our friend, somebody online said. It's possible, sure, for many different groups with different beliefs and ideologies to work together toward a common goal. But the problem is, are we ever going to be able to agree on the right goal? And the issue is there a right goal, and are there inferior goals that descend below that one which is the supreme? And when we have sectarian argument and we don't have a clear hierarchy that descends directly from God's right way, we end up chasing after inferior goals and descending all the way down into literally hellish desires, which is where we are now. And that's why we look at those who represent the goals on the left, which are really the inversion of our identities, inversion of our sexuality, and even up into the harming and murdering of our unborn children. We see that as satanic and inhuman.
So again, I want to give you this little piece so that you understand where I'm coming from a little bit better, because you keep calling me sectarian, and I think that you think I might be an atheist because I told you I was an anthropologist, but I'm the only real Christian because I'm the only person that actually understands what the Bible says, because I've read all of the different versions and the original translations all the way back to the original Greek and then the original Aramaic and then back through Hebrew all the way back to like late Proto-Egyptian when the first texts were written. So I understand these things very deeply and fundamentally. But again, the issue that I have anytime someone starts talking about God and his true intentions is I get a little bit confused about who gets to interpret these things, because sometimes I encounter people that disagree with me about the way that these things ought to be interpreted, and I feel like I ought to be able to tell them, hey, you're wrong, you don't understand what the book says. But then they're all like, well, no, I disagree with you, it doesn't mean that, it means something else entirely, and we go back and forth and around and around. And it does kind of go back to what you're saying of what is the actual right thing to do, what is the actual will of the thing that we're supposed to be doing exactly.
Yeah. Well,
Well, I
we
don't
figured
buy
these
that
things
because
out.
we
That's
don't
what-
get
Also-
we don't get our legitimacy from our own personal interpretation. We get it from years of history and apostolic succession. But again, back to the broad nihilism or the problems with that is that it's like trying to have a moral framework with nihilism is trying to build a house on sand, because you can always kind of needle things down. It's not sufficient enough to just say don't kill people. Like, what if I have a good justification and I want to kill somebody, or it's like advantageous for me to kill somebody, and if I could justify it, then shouldn't I be able to do it? Like, who cares?
If we could imply that no Christian has ever killed anyone, or maybe we take away their Christian card right before they do the murder because no real Christian would ever do a murder, like, maybe we could say that, but again...
Well,
like,
murder's a sin. That's the
like,
thing.
people
Like,
do things for, like, theological and religious justification all the time. Like, that's the leading cause for, I hate to say it, why some crazy people do, like, crazy things, is because
But-
I had to get the devil out of them, or God told me to do it.
nowhere in the church or like under the umbrella of the church are you going to get these like excesses of Apollonianism like you see today. Like you'll have like the Destiny crowds, like one of their latest topics of debate is like, can you justify cannibalism? Under no, like, they can find a rationalization as to why cannibalism is fine or ethical. And you can't do that kind of stuff under the church because it comes back to this like fundamental submission to God.
Usually these conversations are taken up in like a philosophical and an academic sense where everybody understands the satirical nature, not necessarily satirical nature, but like the concept that we are all using a thought experiment. No one is actually going to eat someone. We just need to be able to practice this like mind game, so to speak, for our own mental practice to make sure that we can logically work through our positions and understand where we come from in these things. And in Christianity, there is this sense of, no, you're not even allowed to think about that because, oh my gosh, the bad thing that can happen as a result of it. But again, I don't think that there are a lot of people out there that are like, well, no, I've totally justified why it's fine for me to eat people. And they're in court, like, defending themselves with, I had totally rational arguments for why I did this. Like, that's not necessarily
So
what's
you're
going
appealing
on.
to legality as like the highest moral framework. I mean, that is that's
If
flawed.
in our society,
If I can justify it,
the laws
like morality
lay out
is
our
something
moral
that
framework,
supersedes
yes.
law. Like if I can justify it and that is my moral case why I should be able to eat somebody or kill somebody or anything, then that should be higher than legality because it's morality.
If I morally think that I should be able to go and rob a bank because morally I need the money, like, I don't legally get to go and do that, and we live in the United States where we have a legal framework that controls society and lays out what all of our shared morals are, and our shared morals are created by our legal system that we are all working in common to, like, influence and create. Like, back in the 1913 or 1911, when 75% of us Americans voted we didn't want alcohol anymore, we made it illegal. And then 11 years later, when we all decided that we wanted the alcohol back, we changed the amendment because we needed 75% of the people. And the people influenced what the moral standard of our society was.
How does this animate anybody? How is this like an inspirational thing that would keep people in line? Because you'll get people who just don't care about like the harm it causes to others or anything like that. They'll just go ahead and do it. Like you're not going to be able to motivate people by just saying like we have laws. Like that's not enough to like get to somebody's core. And I don't think there's much that the broad left or like this materialistic worldview that's not just you guys, that's shared by a lot of people, is not sufficient. And it's going to eventually lead to these kinds of like breakdowns in society that we're seeing now, where you get justification after justification, that just leads to these horrible outcomes that compound.
Back to what I first said when I first got here. Like, anybody that is trying to build a logical framework to say that we have to go and do something has to start their logical framework on some faulty assumptions based upon their own personal perspective of the way that reality works. And then they build a framework on top of this, but the framework that they built on top of it are built on top of faulty assumptions in a lot of cases, and we end up going in a direction that may not be the same direction that everybody else goes in because they're making different fundamental assumptions down at the very bottom of it. And again, you're kind of otherizing people on the left. You're saying,
is
well,
not
we
based
all
on that.
on the right, we all have the same base fundamental values. We are all going in the same direction. But if we actually self-examine a little bit harder, we don't have a real unified direction within the right either. We've got a bunch of different directions with a general consensus that, oh my gosh, what they're doing is terrible. And everybody on the left has the same thing where they go, oh my gosh, everything they're doing is terrible. And my goal is to sit in the middle and go, hey, can you guys try a little bit harder to understand what the xenogender people are saying? Because it makes sense to me. And I keep trying to tell them, hey, can you try to understand what the Christian people are saying? Because it makes sense to me. We need to find common ground. That's the point.
All right,
I mean,
here's
when
the
there's
problem.
when there's good,
The problem is, can I go?
Yeah.
The problem with that is, first of all, it's never going to work. You're not going to get the majority, what you're referring to when you talk about swaying policy through votes and through basically mob rule, which is democracy. You're not going to get the numbers to think that way. You're not going to do that. You're not going to get them to get all cerebral and to open up and to gain enough mental clarity and headroom and headspace to really put themselves in the other person's shoe and really understand what they're saying and put their ego aside and you're not going to get them to do that. So you're asking for something that isn't going to happen. So that's ridiculous for that reason, because it's totally impractical. And secondly, Christianity itself isn't based on logical presuppositions that are personal. Christianity itself is based on revelation from God. Now, you can call that a problematic personal presupposition, saying that, well, you presuppose that there is a God who has revealed the truth to us. Well, that's what Christianity is, and we call that faith. And so based on faith and that presupposition that our understanding of God, his laws, and the nature of the universe as it works comes through revelation, that's what Christianity actually is.
My
and
issue isn't with there
does it
is
go
a
back?
God.
Do we have to include the Jews? Do we have to include
Yes!
the No, we don't. We don't, because those who received the revelation, the apostles
that we wouldn't have
themselves,
any
and
anti-Semitism.
they give us a continuing revelation, which is called the Holy Spirit. We have a church, and the church is the continuation of the faith. And the church doesn't include the Gnostics, and it doesn't include the teachings of the fathers and the Talmudic Jews or any of that. So that's all pill pull and misdirection, really.
So I go back to my original statement. The reason that we have so much division is because the right is very exclusionary and thinks that they know the right way to do things, and everybody that doesn't want to do things our way is wrong. And the people on the left think that they know the right way that things...
It's called excluding certain behaviors that are wrong.
Hey, you're going to talk over me again? You just freaking did a monologue, told me to wrap it up so that you could monologue.
Yeah, mine was a third of the length of yours, and so now we're talking.
Let somebody make a statement.
Again, people on the right seem to think that they know the right way, the thing that God really wants, and they think that they can enforce it on everybody else. And the people on the left think that they know the right way, the way that things are really supposed to be, and that they can enforce it on everybody else. And so as long as we have two different sides that think that they need to do two different things because it's the right thing to do, we're never going to be able to find common ground. My original statement.
Well,
now you
Fine,
want to
that's
go back
well,
into
yeah,
the right has it right. We can do that if you want to, but I don't see anybody from the left saying the left is left. I'm here trying to be like, hey, can we find the middle? And if you guys want to beat me up and keep calling me the left because there isn't anybody to represent the left here, you guys can sit here and do your own little circle jerk however you want. I'm just trying to say, can we have a rational conversation every once in a while and try to see eye to eye?
Yeah, I mean, sure, but I think you also have to understand that on the right, a lot of us are like we have faith in a like divine entity, right? And that divine entity has like absolute goods and absolute bads, or absolute evils rather. And it's really hard to find common ground when one side is believing something that we see as absolutely evil. We're not gonna meet some middle point there. I mean, like take the abortion issue as an example. I'm Catholic, and I believe that abortion's wrong at all stages, right? And then you have leftist people who think it's fine, at this stage, this stage, this stage. We're never gonna find common ground there because I just think the act itself intrinsically is an absolute evil, and I think it's an unrealistic expectation, which I think the other guy was saying, that we'll find common ground on things like that. I think when it comes to things that are more like political in nature, I guess, like maybe take like immigration, for example, like there's not really a theological position on immigration to any real extent. Like those things I agree we should have conversations about and try to find common ground, and maybe one side's just completely correct and we realize that through rational discussion. But I think when it comes to some issues, when religion gets involved, it's really impossible to find common ground, and that's not a real expectation, a realistic expectation for people to do that.
It's not just that. I think there's also an issue with the
I have
characterization
Christian
of
friends.
people on the right, because broadly the right wing is mostly composed of like Christian Americans, mostly like white. And then you look at how the left broadly characterizes that history, American history, and there is no point in time when it was like good to be like a white male or like just a white straight person, because your group was responsible for the importation of slavery through the Civil War, and then into Jim Crow, and then into current day oppression. There is no point where it's like acceptable to be like proud of your history, because it's just been so lampooned. So it's difficult to like try and get common ground with people who just kind of like hate you. They have like a blood vendetta for some of these people in particular.
I mean, I think like for that sort of issue though, right? I mean, there is the possibility of finding common ground because it's like not something that's rooted in like some sort of third party arbiter of morality or anything. Like you're just really able to approach it in a similar way on both sides. Like you can just look at like studies, you can look at like history, you can have a conversation about it, and you don't have that completely fundamental disagreement necessarily. So I think, yeah, it's difficult, right? But you can also find common ground, I think, on an issue like that, as opposed to something like abortion.
Yeah.
I'm really curious what you guys would think if I told you about my Christian friends that are trans, or my trans friends that also happen to be Christian. And I'm not saying that all of my trans friends are Christians, but I am saying that I do have extremely Christian, missionary status trans friends that are Christian.
Well,
yeah, I mean, I think they're doing
they're
something
in open
against
revolt
God,
against
right?
the body that
Yeah.
God gave them. So I don't know. I mean, like I hope they see the truth. I mean, I don't want anything that I'm not like violent or something. I don't want them to like die, but hopefully they can reconcile with what God gave them.
In their church, they have not committed any sin, and they are in complete accordance with God's will.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's just a false church then. Yeah, I mean, I think,
I'd say that's a failure church. I'm guessing Episcopalian, if I had to guess.
Okay, so we have good churches and we have bad churches, and these people don't know
Yes.
what's right, and those people do know what's right. And who's the arbiter of this?
Yeah.
Is this a personal
The
decision
church
that
fathers.
you make?
the church fathers.
So the people in charge of your church get to decide which churches are valid, kind of
No,
like
no.
mutual reciprocity with my concealed carry permit.
No,
Like the
no,
different
those.
states can decide who's like got the real
Oh,
word
man,
and who
everybody.
doesn't.
No, I would say that the church with apostolic succession, that had influence from the Holy Spirit, that has the correct interpretation, that was set out thousands of years ago, is the one that's right, more so than like Pastor John in his strip mall church.
You said you're Catholic, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. You're Catholic. I get you. You're cool. Orthodox.
Yeah, well then that's a bit more of a deep schism, but I would say it's similar. I would say it's similar.
Yeah, I would say like the
Different
like,
cultures,
Differences between
man.
Catholic
Like
and
the
Well,
Orthodox
yeah,
Orthodox
but
are
I
are
the original Protestants.
there's theological
less of a
differences, but when it
following,
comes down to public policy and the way that they operate in the state, it's almost just like you're pointing out distinctions without a difference almost every time. It's literally called the Orthodox Catholic Church.
So again, I guess where I'm like coming back to is as long as we're trying to say that, well, if these people aren't being Christian, then that's why we're having a problem, then we can just say, well, that's what the issue is. You guys haven't converted them all to Christians yet, and you guys need to get on your missionary work. So
Ideally,
cop
that's what
two,
would happen.
But there is
the
kind
world
of a
would
little
be
bit
that.
of an issue. You guys need to listen to why these people aren't doing the Christianity thing, because a lot of them used to be Christian and have decided they don't want to do it anymore for one reason or another. And I do suggest you guys try to get to the bottom of what's causing that. Because again, don't look at me like I'm not a Christian, because I think we all are here. It's just I'm the most Christian out of all of us.
I
'Cause
would-
Jesus loves me the most.
I would say that most of the kind of like religious trauma that pushes people away from the church, at least in the West, comes from one of two areas. Either, the church didn't want them to put things up their butt, or they didn't want to wake up early on Sunday morning to go to church. I think that's mostly where the contention comes from.
Yeah, and I think
yeah.
also a real issue is that a lot of people have just studied the Bible too much, and it actually does cause people to go crazy. When you study it without understanding of what you're reading, without any guidance and leadership and interpretation for you, and without context of understanding what you're looking at, it sends people into a weird narcissistic ego trip, thinking that they've got it all figured out. And it really doesn't work that way. That's not what the document itself is for. It never has been. And we didn't even have like massive public access to it until the printing press was invented. Like the Gutenberg press changed everything. And then they translated it from Latin to German to English, and then all of a sudden everybody's reading it, and they think they become their own little priest, and it became a problem.
So, as to
I
try and
agree. Everybody needs to go back to the Catholic Church. Joe Biden is setting a great example. He's a good Catholic. Go
Yeah,
and follow the
Brandon's
orders.
awesome.
Become a Catholic. Listen to the Pope.
No.
He's a Novus Ordo, New Order.
Brandon's
Irish
awesome.
Catholic.
Under his reign, we're getting rid of abortion. That's epic.
That's
No,
right.
I'm joking.
Joe Biden reactionary.
But to the common ground thing with the left is difficult as well, because like a good tree or like a bad tree does not bear good fruit, and we see over the past however many years, I guess you could say since the 60s, I would probably say earlier, what we get under like unfettered liberalism, or like this constant progress where back in 15 we had legalization of gay marriage, and like now, like 7 years later, it's just gone like so far off the deep end, and these kinds of lifestyles are just unhealthy. And like if they were to follow a Christian worldview, if they were to be Catholic, then they would not have these issues. They wouldn't be having like a lot of these problems that gay people have when it comes to like bowel control, or all the horrors of like gender reassignment surgery, or just like the hormonal damage that happens for people who don't even go through with these surgeries. They just like do the hormonal transition. Like these are like broken people with broken lives, and if they were to like stop being so proud and like humble themselves, there would be this would be like easier to find common ground.
I had a very interesting conversation yesterday in my Discord between a Republican from California and a liberal person from Texas. And they were talking about
No
gun
way.
rights. And they were talking
Mhm.
about the way that we need to solve all of these gun issues because, man, oh man, it would be so simple. All that we need to do is to do this, or we just need to do that. And there was a really wide variety of different things that they wanted to do. But I think that at the end of the day, what it came down to is they wanted the police to look at every single person, to label some of them as the bad ones, and those ones are the criminals, and then they can't have the guns, and they can't get anywhere near the gun stores because they're the bad ones. And then all the good ones could have all of the guns that they wanted, and they shouldn't have any waiting periods or any background checks or anything that slowed down the process from them being able to get the guns and take them to go and shoot them. But what we needed to do is we needed to have the police have absolute, total authoritarian control over everyone's action and know what everyone was doing at every moment. That way we could tell which ones were the bad ones, and we could freeze them in time so that they couldn't do anything. And then all of the good ones could be free to do whatever they want because America is the land of the free. And I was trying to point out to them how silly they sounded talking to one another, but they couldn't see what I saw for some reason. But they enjoyed their conversation, and I enjoyed watching them.
Yeah, I
Like I
agree.
told
That
you,
kind of
They're never
that
going to see it.
that kind of thing requires inhuman levels of precognition from the police. So that kind of thing would never work. You're not going to solve the gun issue with some policy here, some policy there, taking these guns from people, giving them to others. It's more of an issue of societal breakdown. We've only seen this kind of mass shooting violence or school shootings ever since the 60s. That's when it became a phenomenon, and then it ramped up in the 90s up until today, where you see all these other shootings happening almost routinely every year. But I think that tracks better with societal breakdown than it does with advances in gun technology or gun ownership or anything like that. So we
I
got
gotta say, it looks like we might have just a failed panel here. I think I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
No disrespect
Oh,
to
no.
Woody the Cowboy, but I think you've done well to represent the left, sort of, I guess. But we don't really have anybody on the left here. So we just
Yeah.
have no
Kevin,
debate.
Kevin had a thing come up at last minute, and then Mythic still
Awesome.
having mic issues on his end. So this
Yeah.
seemed to just kind of be bad luck that struck us at the last minute.
Well, I will say I did enjoy
Maybe
the
we'll try
opportunity
again.
to speak to all of you guys. I've spoken to some of you guys in the
Yeah.
past here and there. I think this was a relatively productive conversation, but shit happens sometimes, and that's why we do dry runs like this every once in a while, I guess.
Yeah, we can do the other topic another time. Where am I doing this here? I do kind of want to watch the Roger Stone thing too.
Yeah.
If you guys want to watch
But yeah, no, it like I said, this was just kind of bad luck. Really, wasn't even it was Mythic had mic problems. Kevin had something come up last minute, so it happens.
Divine
Right,
intervention.
good job
Well,
on the
Queen
break.
Alexa, do you have anything to say? I mean,
We're going to go watch Roger Stone, guys, so don't go anywhere. Hang out. We're going to go check that out after this.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty far left. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to throw your hat in the ring or something, or are we just gonna call this?
I mean, we disagree on quite a bit, but
Yeah.
like I said, I'm just here to moderate the show.
Gotcha.
All right.
Well, all
Yeah,
right.
that's what it is.
We can pick it up.
We can't have Queen Alexa ruin her good reputation, so to speak, by
Yeah.
voicing
Yeah,
opinions.
you don't wanna-
It's a dangerous
You don't want to
game
get
we
down in the
play.
mud. Yeah.
You don't get BTFO'd in your own server.
True, I get fucking owned by you guys. Get fucking ended.
Yeah. Let's see here. I do want to check this out though.
All right, everybody. We're going to go do a thing without these folks, but we're going to go do a thing, all right? All right, everybody. We got rid of them. We're going to go and check out Roger Stone in a quick minute or two, but do me a favor and hang tight. I'm going to do this be right back thing. Play you guys some music, so to speak, and I'll see you in a minute. Holy heck, guys. I just got here. I've never seen a room like this before. This is something else. Here, let me unmute them. Nobody's talking because nobody can hear anything because this is Roger Stone's speaking room. But take a look. Man, oh man, you guys see this Discord room here? Look at how many people there are. Look, there I am right there. Holy Hannah, not so erudite's here. Who else is here? Man, oh man, Naho. Frickin' who else do I know? I don't know that many people that are here. Goofy, I know him. I know Baby Yoda. I know Rose Petal. Vivian. And there he is.
Hello. So yeah, as you guys have noticed, we've closed off the rest of the server for at least a couple hours. When the AMA finishes, we will start opening everything back up. Okay, so I think most of you have probably been to an AMA before. This one's going to be handled a little bit differently. The way that we're going to be doing this is... Oh, 1 second. I need to give Roger a rank here. Okay, so the way that we're going to be doing this is pretty simple. If you've already submitted a question in AMA questions, I hope you have, because if you haven't, there's a very slim chance it's going to get called up. But if you already have, good job, because we're going to be going through those first. If you want to ask a question, we're not going to be calling people's usernames. I'm not going to be saying, hey, Fart Sniffer 3000 wants to know this, right? Like, that's very cringe.
All right, everybody. So what's going on is Doobie. You guys may or may not know him. He's the frog dude that shows up every once in a while on our panels and give us some base opinions in the Discord. He's gotten Roger Stone, which is one of those dudes that worked for Trump that went to jail for being a bad guy, and then Donald Trump pardoned for being like, no, he didn't do nothing wrong, nothing at all. And, well, he's going to be here today now that he's a free man who did nothing wrong at any time because he got a pardon from President Trump. He's going to be here. He was involved with the campaign, organizing things, January 6th, a variety of other things. I'm sure that people are going to be asking about stuff. It's going to be interesting. Doobie's here introducing now, and we're bringing people in.
And yeah, just add your questions to the chat. Do not spam. If you get up here, it's the chance of a lifetime for most of you. Roger has been involved in politics, and he's been a formidable force in American politics for like 40 years, 4 decades. So the chance to talk to somebody like him who's been as involved as he has is like, it's massive. And if you're somebody who's interested in politics at all, you should really take advantage of the opportunity. So don't troll, don't be rude, don't be an asshole. He's never done anything like this before. I'm sure he's charged thousands and thousands of dollars to even speak at a place, and he's doing this for us out of basically the kindness of his heart. So, yeah, don't be a dickhead, because I will ban you for a minimum of 3 months if you are.
What a guy.
Like political disagreements with him aside. Okay. So Goldie, if he's here, you should be able to add him to the stage.
He just DM'd me on the account. I'm trying to get him to figure out how to join the... Let me send him an invite in his PMs. I think that'll help.
Okay.
It says maximum number of invites to the server reached. Can you PM me an invite link? I'm on streamer mode.
Yeah, just use discord.gg/politics. One second.
No. I want him to be invited to this particular channel.
Oh, yeah, 1 second.
Yeah.
Lady Ramoth has arrived. We've got a bunch of people that I know here. This is amazing. Like I said, Roger Stone is going to show up. We'll have a chat with him as well. I personally won't get to talk to him, but...
While I'm doing this, yeah, guys,
Head for
again,
Hydra. Good to see you
please
too.
be polite. Don't be a dickhead. I will ban you. Be respectful. Yada, yada. And
Oh. Mr. Girl is here.
give me like 10 seconds. And if you do get a chance to come up here, take it seriously, please.
He says no idea how to join the event in progress. I'll help him.
There's politically provoked
Here,
Brit.
send him that one. That one should have
Okay.
gone right to the stage.
Gotcha.
If you guys are sending me DMs, I will probably not see them until like a couple hours after the AMA. So, just FYI. Unless you're the people that I've spoken to previously about, pulling in later.
Oh, he's in. Here we go.
Cool.
Let me invite him to speak.
Here we go.
Hello, Mr. Stone. How are you doing today?
Greetings. I have overcome my technological disadvantages.
Well, we all start somewhere. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have the one, the only, the agent provocateur, or the Prince of Darkness, Mr. Roger J. Stone. For those of you who don't know who he is the man who has probably brought us our last few great Republican presidents, and he is single-handedly responsible for creating Donald Trump as a political figure. He's doing this out of the kindness of his heart, like Abraham said, and it's an honor to have him here. So he'll be taking all of your questions. Let's keep it respectful, and I'm very happy that he's here.
Delighted to be here.
Roger, I help run the server. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. It's a massive deal to us. We really appreciate it. I can't express enough how much it means to us to have someone like you here. We are the premier politics server on Discord. We are the biggest, the best, most active politics server on the Discord platform. And we do our best to get people like you on. So you are the most important, most relevant, I think most influential person we've ever had on the server. So I've told these people they should be kissing your toes through this entire thing. But I'm gonna do a little bit of it right now. I really, really, really appreciate you coming on. I can't express it enough. And yeah, I hope we have a good time.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, I think we're ready for our first question. You want to start it off then, Abe?
Yeah, I'll get right into it. So first question that we've got here is going to be from, we're going to go with Steve. So the first question is, he says, "Greetings, Mr. Stone. It's a pleasure to have you on the server. Do you believe a parent should have the majority of rights to their children's medical choices as opposed to their teachers? And do you believe that Republicans and Democrats could have peace someday between each other?"
The first part of your question is until they gain the age of majority. Yes, absolutely. I think parents should have the authority over their children's medical decisions until the time that they are adults. Will Republicans and Democrats have peace? In all honesty, I think that you've had a political realignment in the country. In other words, there was a time, certainly when I was growing up, when both parties were in the center left and center right, but in the center, they had fundamental differences in their individual governing philosophies. Republicans wanted to spend a little less and tax a little less. The Democrats wanted to spend a little more and tax a little more. But I think now that the modern day Democratic Party has shook off the control of their corporate wing, I think they are now controlled by a more radical wing. It's also true, however, at the same time, that the democratization of politics, meaning party candidates are not chosen by party leaders, but chosen by voters, when combined with congressional redistricting, which really limits the number of truly competitive districts and puts a premium both on the right and on the left in highly partisan districts in which the most radical candidate is more likely to be nominated and therefore elected, has caused this polarization in our country. And the parties now are very very far apart in terms of what they believe. So I think it is unlikely that we have some big kumbaya moment in our near future.
It's a great answer. Thank you for that. Ben?
Our next question is going to come from Luna. Now, Luna is asking, how was Richard Nixon like in person? Was he really a, quote, crook like the media made him out to be, or was he a rather friendly person in private?
Richard Nixon was an introvert in a extrovert's business. He was pretty shy, actually, very private. People don't know is that Nixon, for example, could not read music, but he played the violin, the piano, the harmonica, the accordion, the saxophone, the clarinet, all of that by ear. He was a guy not very comfortable in his own skin, physically fairly graceless, but extraordinarily disciplined in the sense that his body weight at the time that he passed was almost identical as his body weight at the time that he left the Navy. He was very, very disciplined in what he ate and what he drank. He was very disciplined in his daily exercise. He was doing calisthenics and so on long before physical fitness was popular or an important part of our culture. He was very sentimental. He was a very decent man. For example, when I worked for Nixon, he knew my children's name. He knew my wife's name. He remembered my birthday. He was a very good politician in that sense. Was he a crook? Well, a crook would mean that he stole to line his own pockets. And I think he played the game of politics as it was defined. He didn't enrich himself at the public trough the way, say, Lyndon Johnson did. Johnson bought a series of radio stations and television stations. Then he used the influence at the FCC to boost their power and their value. Johnson owned millions of dollars in stocks for defense contractors who benefited mildly when he ramped up the Vietnam War. I just use him as an example. Nixon came to office fairly poor. He left office fairly poor. There's never any evidence that he stole money or was in any way using public power to line his own pockets. So I would say that he was probably more honest than some of our more recent presidents who have gone into public service penniless and come out as multimillionaires.
Thank you for that. Our next question is going to be our first voice question. And guys, just so you're aware, if you wanted to speak to Roger directly, just make sure you have your hand raised in the stage when we call you out. So Michael, you're up next. Just accept the invite and you'll be able to pop right in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, it's an honor to talk to you, Roger. My question basically is, recently you were at Mar-a-Lago with Trump, and I believe you guys were, talking about DeSantis. What are your thoughts on him, and do you think Trump should be careful?
Well, I have very mixed views on him. I know him quite well. I know him back to his days in the House. He's extraordinarily ambitious. He's also very, very disciplined. Like Nixon, and unlike Trump, he's an introvert in an extrovert's business. Ron never really looks you in the eye. Ron doesn't particularly like people. He doesn't like to engage with people. He rarely says thank you even to his biggest donors. He does extremely well in any format where he has complete control of the discourse, press conference, for example. I don't think he fared particularly well in his two debates with his opponent, the mayor of Tallahassee, in the last election. I do think he's running for president. I do think he has $100 million plus raised in his state account. I think he has close to 90 million in his federal account. Why a governor would need a federal account, well, I think we know the answer to that. I think he'll be a very formidable candidate for president, assuming he chooses to run, and I believe he's running as of today. At the same time, depending on your point of view, his rhetoric in Florida has not really matched his record. For example, one of his biggest applause lines is when he says, if they send illegal immigrants to Florida, they meaning the federal government, I'll send them to Delaware. That line brings the house down, except for we have more than 248,000 illegals here who've come here either by bus or by plane, and he hasn't sent any of them to Delaware or anywhere else. He claimed that under state law, school children in Florida were no longer being required to wear masks, but in truth, in the 10 largest counties that had the 10 largest school districts, 3.6 million children continued to be required to wear masks, and the governor took no action against those school districts. He had the authority to fire those school board members, replace them with individuals who would uphold state law, but he did not do so. More recently, as you may have seen, after claiming that he would withhold funding from schools who thumbed their nose at his mask mandate ban, he's restored funding to them. Those are just a couple of examples where I think the record falls short of the rhetoric. We have in Florida, by federal statute, 500 active members of the Capitol Hill Police who are located somewhere between Tampa and Orlando. This is all in the public record. And they're here investigating, quote unquote, right-wing extremism. That's odd because we've never had a legislative police force before. They report only to the Speaker of the House. They don't report to the Justice Department. They don't report to the FBI. They report to the legislative branch of government. The governor's done nothing about this. I could go on, but I guess the more important point is this. Before you run for president in 2024, you have to get reelected governor in 2022. I think it is a mistake for him to take that election for granted.
They're kind of loud. Huh?
I have seen
turn them down.
polling that I have confidence in the last couple weeks show that race is much, much closer than you would think. Florida is not a red state. Florida is not a blue state. Florida is a purple state. It is always going to be extraordinarily competitive. So even with that enormous financial advantage, he is not a certain bet for reelection. And if I were him, I would focus on getting reelected before I focused on running for president. I have kind of an alternative view. In a certain sense, I think Nikki Fried, who is the state agriculture commissioner, a woman I know very well because she's from my home county, who I was once quite friendly with. Don't think she wants my endorsement in the governor's race. I think she's going to be a more formidable and more difficult candidate for governor than people think. Charlie Crist, former Republican governor, turned independent, turned Democrat. You can only go back to the well so many times. So Charlie Crist has very high name ID, but he also is carrying very substantial negatives. I think a lot of that comes from his party switching. But if you analyze the Democratic primary polling data, where Crist leading Fried, it is based almost solely on his strong showing among African American voters. Yet, as Attorney General, back when he was a Republican, he called himself Chain Gang Charlie, and he supported the most draconian aspects of the misguided war on drugs. That's where, under federal law and state law, there are harsh mandatory penalties for the first time nonviolent crime of possession of small amounts of drugs for personal use. I believe drug abuse is a public health issue. I don't think it's a criminal justice issue. People with no prior criminal record, say the housewife with 3 kids who gets caught with a small amount of marijuana in her purse, should not be facing a mandatory jail sentence. She should not even be incarcerated. She's not a danger to herself or anyone else. If anything, she belongs in a drug treatment program. So I think if black voters are reminded of Charlie's right-wing Republican past, which he hopes everybody has forgotten, that Democratic Party will be primary be much more competitive. To go back to your larger question, I'm a big believer in loyalty. I certainly don't argue that Donald Trump is perfect. I certainly don't argue that he's done everything right. I obviously have a personal allegiance to him, but I would point out to you, Ron DeSantis would not be governor without Donald Trump. Ron DeSantis' opponent, Adam Putnam, the state agriculture commissioner, was endorsed by every single Republican county chairman in the state, every single Republican member of the state legislature in both houses, every Republican member of the House of Representatives, with the exception of Matt Gaetz. It is only the endorsement of Donald Trump that lifted DeSantis out of the pack and made him a candidate, made him the candidate. And then in the closing weeks of that campaign, as you may remember, Trump had to appear in Florida twice, in essence, in the last 2 weeks, to drag DeSantis over the finish line. So if I were DeSantis, I guess I would be prepared to step aside for Trump, because there is no guarantee whatsoever that Trump is definitely going to run again. I'm not convinced that he is definitely going to run again. I'm also not convinced that he is not. I did speak to him today, by the way, to wish him happy birthday. But I think there's at least a reasonable chance that he will not run. And therefore, I think DeSantis could inherit that support with a less confrontational handling of President Trump.
Thank you.
Okay.
Kind of a long answer, but anyway.
Our next person that we are going to bring up is Landon. He wants to ask a question about Stone's rules.
Good.
Hello, Landon, you there?
I think he might be dead.
Landon, are you there? Your
Next.
mic's not working right now.
Avoid him.
Okay, we can
Continue
come back
on.
to
We
him.
have
Just
no
request
time.
to speak and we'll come back to you. Okay, I think the next person that we'll bring in is Eric. He's prepared to ask a good question, hopefully.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Eric, go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Stone. So you famously said, if I weren't effective, you wouldn't hate me. There's
Yes.
no question your brand of politics is effective, but do you think it would be a net positive or a net negative for our society if all of our politicians practice your brand of politics?
Well, it's not up to me what they do. Politics ain't beanbag. It has always been a contact sport in the United States because it's based on human nature. Human nature is not going to change. I also have said that I'm prepared to do anything to elect my candidates short of breaking the law. I'm not a big believer in that. So, sure, would it be nice if we had a kinder, gentler form of politics? Yes. But in the competitive and extraordinarily expensive politics we have today, I think it's unrealistic. One man's dirty trick is another man's civic participation. We have a highly polarized politics in the country. I don't expect that to change. But I have no apologies for what I've done because, as a T-shirt once famously said, Roger Stone did nothing wrong.
Interesting.
Okay, thank you for that question.
Thank you. Next up, we've got Dina. Dina, whenever you're ready, go for it. You'll just need to accept the invite, Dina. There you are. Okay, yeah, you're in here. You just need to unmute yourself. Okay, you ready? If you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Looks like her microphone is off.
Yeah, it says you're muted on our end.
I think Mr. Stone, you did a better job than some of these people coming up here on the technology.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. Okay, we'll try one more time, Dina. Actually, you know what? I'm going to roll on to somebody else, and if you get that issue figured out, let me know. So this question is from Melody. The question is, Melody says, Roger, I'd like to know if you think that between both current political parties, if large majorities are both working together, if large majorities of both are working together behind the scenes while acting like sworn enemies to deceive, divide, and distract the public from current goings on that could be considered dubious or corrupt.
I do think that there's a ruling elite in the country. I do think it transcends both parties. I do think that there is a lot of kabuki theater in Washington, a lot of fighting that is staged for public consumption. But the overwhelming number of incumbents get reelected. I do think that the divisions in our country today are between elites and non-elites, between the establishment and regular people. I have no deep-seated philosophical commitment to the Republican Party. I just happen to think it is the best vehicle for those who have a more conservative viewpoint to try to nominate and elect candidates of our persuasion. That said, having worked in both the U.S. Senate and worked in the House, Washington has a way of changing people. So I think individuals, both left and right, go to Washington with ideals, with principles, but they very soon get subsumed, mostly by the need to get reelected. So if you're a congressman or a congresswoman and you're an incumbent, you're spending 5 nights a week in Washington, D.C. on the fundraising circuit, out trying to scrape up the money to get reelected. I'm a firm believer in term limits. I think term limits would be a very positive thing. Limit people to 6 years in the House or 8 years in the House. Limit U.S. senators to 2 terms in the Senate. That would be 12 years. Have a constant flow of new people and fresh blood to the process. I think that would be a positive development. If you look at the polling across the board, Republicans and Democrats, people are overwhelmingly in favor of the concept. But you're never going to get term limits because the people in charge of implementing them have no interest in leaving power. So the short answer is yes, I do think that there's a ruling elite that transcends both parties, that does dominate public affairs, and I think they do it to the detriment, in many cases, of the average citizen.
Awesome
Excellent.
answer. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and bring up another user named Jacob. So here's him, and he shall ask his question shortly.
Yeah, here we
You have to
go. I
accept the
raised
invitation
myself
to
up.
speak.
I lowered them down. We'll see how it goes. I'm playing a game. They're talking about this and that. I'm technically here. I have my hand up.
Okay,
See
well,
if they
I
let me
guess
talk.
not. I actually have a question in the meantime. Mr. Stone, who would you say is enemy number 1 in the Republican Party? Focused on which rhino would you say is enemy number 1? Who do we have to get rid of as quickly as possible?
That would have to be Mitch McConnell, who I think is, here's a perfect example of someone who came to public office relatively poor, who's made tens of millions of dollars through his business activities in China. I'm not a big fan of Kevin McCarthy either, the would-be House Speaker. I think that there should be stark differences between the parties. So those two would be my nominee.
I see.
So Dina says she's ready now. So I'm going to try this again, Dina. Just accept the invite when you're ready. There she is. Fingers
There we
crossed.
go.
Can you speak? I
We
don't think
lost
she can
her
speak.
again.
Yeah, I think she might be having issues. See, Roger, it's not so bad. I think Dina's like in her 20s and she can't figure this out either. So instead, let's go to Michael. Michael, I want to pull you in. We have like 2 seconds here. Whenever you're ready, Michael.
Hi there. So we're not allowed to ask any of the really fun questions, so that's kind of boring. But so I'll ask this instead. You've been in lobbying and campaigns for decades now. Pulling from that experience, what do you have to comment on the idea or the feeling that a large amount of American citizens have that their government and their public institutions are not working for them? Yeah.
Well, I haven't worked in as a lobbyist in over 30 years, just to be clear. I'm not really interested in government. I'm more interested in politics, science of winning public office. When I was a lobbyist, I wasn't very good at it. But I would make the observation that in Washington, D.C., if you have enough money and if you have the right lobbyists and paid for connections, virtually anything whatsoever can be purchased. And I think that's a bad thing. So I do think that our government institutions and major, multilateral corporations who can spend without limitation have perverted the system, which is why I never intend to work as a lobbyist again. I didn't like it. I wasn't good at it. It's not really. That's the governmental process that I have very little interest in.
Okay, we're gonna try Landon again. I hope that he figured his stuff out this time. Here he is.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, my question is for Mr. Stone. How did he get to his process on writing Stone's rules? Like, what is his writing process?
Okay, good question. I wanted to write a book that would be valuable to everybody, that was based on the things that I had learned in 40 years in the public arena. It's not an ideological book. The examples I use are obviously from my own career, but I think the book would be of interest and value whether you were a progressive or a liberal or a Democrat or non-political or a Republican or a conservative or a libertarian. I also think it would be valuable to you regardless of your chosen profession. Doesn't matter whether it would be tech or the arts or agriculture. It doesn't matter what it is. These are just things that I compiled over the years from personal experience. Two individuals really pushed me to finally publish this book, which without exaggeration was probably 25 years in the making. Essentially, I was just collecting string. In other words, I had a notebook and I would write down observations that I had based on experiences that I had. Mike Smerconish at CNN, a friend of mine. We don't agree on politics. We used to, but he's kind of moved left. I still respect him enormously. Think he's a very talented and smart guy. Urged me to write this. Tucker Carlson was the other individual, friend of mine of more than 30 years, I guess. Both urged me to write it. I'm not a very quick typist, so I prefer to dictate everything and then have it corrected or edit it myself, but that's really the process. Writing a book, and I've written 5, is far more difficult than you might think, particularly if you're a perfectionist. And therefore, there are times when I would go back and rewrite the same section 3 or 4 times until I was satisfied with it. I do recommend it. My first book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, it's about the Kennedy assassination. Very, very heavily footnoted and documented in the back. I took that book to 6 different publishers, all of whom told me it had no commercial appeal whatsoever, that no one would ever buy it, and it became a New York Times bestseller. And even today, without much promotion or advertising, that book still makes me money. You can be skeptical if you want, but I urge you to read the book before you form an opinion. I think I make a very compelling case using eyewitness evidence, fingerprint evidence, deep Texas politics, and a lot that has not yet been assembled in one place, but reported elsewhere, to make the case that there was, in fact, a plot that involved the man who benefited the most, Lyndon Johnson, the military-industrial complex, including the Pentagon, our intelligence services, the Secret Service, organized crime, and big Texas oil to murder John F. Kennedy. I did not have the appreciation for President Kennedy that I have today, that I did not have that appreciation in the 60s and the 70s. I do think had he survived, he would have gone down as one of our greatest presidents. But he and his brother were challenging the status quo, the military-industrial complex of their time. I think it is one of the great tragedies that he ran as a pro-civil rights candidate in 1960, but his vice president, Lyndon Johnson, talked him out of more aggressive civil rights legislation in his first term, a Voting Rights Act, an Open Housing Act, a Voter Registration Act.
All right, folks. I don't know
on
if you're
the
still there
theory
or
that
not,
the
but Doobie told me that I
Senate
might get the
committee
chance
chairman
to ask a
in,
question if
in
I
those
come
days
up with
were all
something.
Southerners,
So,
and they
I
would
need
kill
your
his
guys'
budget and
help.
the rest of his program.
Right
Of course,
now, I'm
immediately
working on
upon
who
Kennedy's
approached
death,
who in the initial runoff,
Lyndon Johnson
and
would
himself or Donald
recast
Trump,
himself. He was a
and,
lifelong
how did the
segregationist
initial decision
who, as Senate Majority Leader,
go
had
in
killed
forming
every
the,
piece of civil rights legislation.
decision to run and what the campaign
but
would look like?
through his commitment to civil
I'm very
rights,
excited about
he
that
also got
personally.
the ability to plunge us far deeper into Vietnam without criticism from the left wing of his own party. So if you haven't read the book, I strongly recommend it. It reads like a murder mystery purposely. I stand by its conclusions, and as I said, pretty heavily documented.
I have a follow-up question for Benjamin. He's always advocating for your stone rules, and I would like to ask you on like how he feel, like how it's helped him in his life.
Well, thank you for the question.
That'd be a question for him, not for me.
I'll answer that quickly. Well, I have a rather rags to riches story, and I can say that the rules are more life lessons on success, ambition, self-responsibility. If you're going to read it, I recommend that you do. I think that it can really push you in the right direction. Make sure you get yourself a signed copy, so you know it has some sentimental value. And you know, it teaches the lesson that a man is not finished when he is defeated. He is only finished when he quits. So I highly recommend that everybody read that, and I think that it will really add success to your life. But thank you for the question, Landon.
Interesting. You can get something out of all
Awesome,
kinds
thank
of
you,
different
Landon.
books.
So I've actually got. I'm going to steal a question from myself, if that's okay. So you've been kind of painted as like a very Machiavellian figure, kind of like this man in the shadows pulling the strings from behind the Republican Party for like decades, right? And I wonder how you feel about that representation being out there, like that being there, the caricature they've created about you. And
No,
because you've kind of gloated about, hey, if they hate me, it means I'm effective, right? And I think there's obviously some truth to that. So do you kind of like is that a sign to you that the work you're doing is impactful and you're doing the right thing, or do you feel like they're like painting you some kind of like evil like monster? And was there anything you think you could do to change that portrayal? And if you could, would you want to?
Well, if you went to Twitter right now, you can see the ravings of a bunch of menopausal harpies who insist that I am the root of all evil, that I am the mastermind of the January 6th insurrection. Sorry, wasn't there, don't know anything about it. that I was behind Trump's claim of a stolen election. Actually, we never talked about the results of the election at all in the post-election period. I mean, they blame me for everything, including the assassination of Abraham Lincoln at this point. I believe that one has to deal with the situation not as you would like it to be, but as it is. Remember that not only was I charged with lying to Congress about Russian collusion with the Trump campaign, which we now know definitively did not happen, but for 2.5 years, my patriotism, my loyalty to the country was challenged. I was accused of being a Russian asset, of working with Russians for the election of Trump. There was never any evidence of that, not presented at my trial, not what I was charged with. I was charged with lying about things that we now know definitively didn't happen. Only in D.C. Could this happen. And therefore, the dirty trickster, let me get this exactly right. The self-proclaimed dirty trickster. Actually, I've never proclaimed myself to be that. I actually got the LA Times to print a retraction because I've never described myself that way. Others have. The other one is the convicted felon. Well, unfortunately for them, my felony conviction is voided by the unconditional presidential pardon that I received. So at this point, I'm a polarizing figure. When you go through a crucible like I've been through, you find out who your real friends are. You find out who the people are who pretended to be your friends when it was in their best interest, but were never really your friends at all. Many of them in the mainstream media. People who I helped, help their children get into school, help them get a job promotion, help them get information allowing them to break a big story, therefore advance in their career. There's almost kind of a direct inverse proportion. The more I did to help you, the faster and more vicious they were in their attacks on me. And the most unfair part, of course, is I was gagged by a federal judge. I couldn't even respond to criticism. It doesn't seem very fair to me. No place in federal law does it say if you're charged with a crime that you lose your First Amendment rights to free speech. I now see that Peter Navarro is being gagged by the judge. Now, there is some distinction here. I was subpoenaed by the January 6th committee, and I fulfilled my legal obligations under the subpoena. I showed up, and I invoked my Fifth Amendment rights not to answer questions, not because I did anything wrong, not because I had anything to hide, but because I had almost recently had direct experience with the ability to twist what you say, no matter how innocuous, no matter how immaterial, no matter how unimportant, no matter whether it was or was not covering some underlying crime, and turn that into a process crime. And therefore, that was not a risk I was going to take. Navarro, Steve Bannon, a man who should be rushed immediately to a dermatologist and a haberdasher, and should be introduced to hot water and soap, in my opinion. These guys chose to thumb their nose at the subpoena, and I think that is unwise. If they didn't want to answer questions, they had a constitutional right not to, but to just ignore the subpoena was to invite a contempt citation for which they now have serious legal jeopardy. The argument that they don't have to testify, the two arguments, that the January 6th committee is improperly constituted, the courts have ruled against that. My opinion is not important. I happen to agree that it is improperly constituted, but the courts have ruled otherwise. So be it. And then secondarily, the argument that that executive privilege prevents them from being required to testify. Well, Bannon was a former federal employee, so I don't know how executive privilege would cover his activities after he had left the service of the president. And in the case of Navarro, we'll see how that legal argument works. I also agree with the argument that President Biden cannot waive the executive privilege put forward by the previous president in a previous period. The chronology of that seems to me to be legally problematic, but then I'm not an attorney.
Thank you so much for that answer.
I'm going to steal a question because I think this is something that everyone should hear. Now, I know we've talked about this, Mr. Stone, but one of your most famous things on the internet, I think, is when you and Alex stormed the Young Turks. If you kind of want to talk about, what kind of went on there and some of the scandalous liberal, I guess you could say, tricks that they tried to pull there, I think that would be very interesting for people to hear.
Well, that got a huge number of hits on social media. A lot of people saw it. But to be very clear, we were at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. Alex Jones, who's quite an entertaining fellow, and I were walking through the media section, and a woman who Jones knew, who was a producer for the Young Turks, asked us to come by their set and to stop by for their broadcast. Jones had been on with the Young Turks previously as an invited guest several times. So he said, I know these guys, this will be good, we'll have a dialogue, let's go do it. I was pretty unsure, so I kind of hung back. And then, of course, as many people have seen, as soon as he was on the set, the same woman who invited us, woman wearing a red dress, started screaming that we had crashed their broadcast. We didn't crash their broadcast. I can only be seen kind of off on the side until Chunky Ogre, or whatever his name is, started yelling at me that I was a liar. And I said, what did I lie about? And he said, Eliot Spitzer. Well, Eliot Spitzer resigned as governor of New York because he was caught patronizing prostitutes. The issue, by the way, is not patronizing prostitutes. As a libertarian, I think that prostitution should probably be legalized and even regulated. But as Attorney General, he was locking up people who were patronizing prostitutes. At the same time, he was doing the same thing. So his sin was hypocrisy. Anyway, that is the background, just proving that not everything is the way it appears on the internet.
That was a great answer. That was a great response.
Now, next up, I'm going to go to my friend Star. Star, if you're in, you just need to raise your hand in the stage. If I don't see it. Yeah, there you are. Okay. So Star actually happens to be a Twitch streamer, a political Twitch streamer. So she had a few questions for you, if that's okay.
It's
Star, whenever you're
guys.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I guess the first question I had, it's kind of related to Doobie's question. When did you first start noticing claims of being like a dirty trickster going around about you? And secondly, when you first started noticing them, did they have any effect on you?
You guys know Stardust,
They started
right?
when I started winning elections on behalf of my candidates. Politics is a sharp-edged game. It's not beanbag. I am, by my own admission, I am one of the originators of the comparative television or radio ad, where you take the record of your opponent and compare it to the your own positions. So I chalk it up to partisanship. The people calling me a dirty trickster are usually people I had defeated in an election. Do I like it? Do I dislike it? It's almost immaterial. It's going to be on my tombstone, whether I like it or not. I just think it is it's an attribute of our current polarized system. People, what does bother me, and I don't like, is, well, you're a white supremacist. Let's take that for a moment, if we may. When I was working for Ronald Reagan, he decided not to extend the Voting Rights Act, which ensured the voting rights of African Americans in the South. I disagreed with that. I wrote an op-ed for the Washington Times disagreeing with it. I support affirmative action. Affirmative action is a program which gives preferences to African Americans in federal contracting, in education, in job hiring, and so on. I think people who've been discriminated against should get some leg up in the future system. It's a very, very unpopular position among conservatives, but I support it. I think the war on drugs is one big, ignominious, racist disaster. I think that the harsh mandatory penalties for the possession of small amounts of drugs by people with no previous criminal records has fallen disproportionately on the backs of poor people and people of color. But Richard Nixon's war on drugs was aimed at drug traffickers and drug dealers. It is Senate Judiciary Chairman Joe Biden and President Bill Clinton seeking to look tough for a round of elections that gave you the turbocharged war on drugs. I think that the criminal justice system is rigged against African Americans. I think it should be fixed. So this notion of just calling names based on an assumption is just wrong. I'm a 30-year advocate for the legalization of cannabis. I do think it has medicinal value. I think the great health problem in this country today are opioids. There's your health crisis. And believe me, many of my conservative friends don't agree with my positions in this area, but people just want to put you in a box. They don't really want to stop and focus on your views. Same-sex marriage is another example. When we had a constitutional amendment in Florida which would have banned it, I was opposed to that. I think each individual should make their own decision. I wrote an editorial against it. I campaigned against it. Unfortunately, the ban passed very, very narrowly. So I'm not a knee-jerk right-winger. I'm a libertarian. I think a lot of my positions might surprise you, but nobody bothers to ask. They just jump to conclusions. And that's what I don't like.
If I can steal another question, a lot of times people on this server debate and say that Joe Biden is not responsible for gas spikes. Could you elaborate to the people, if you believe that Joe Biden is responsible, why he
Closing
is
down the
responsible?
Keystone Pipeline and curtailing all of the domestic exploration and drilling, not to mention closing down the drilling in the Arctic, are directly responsible for the fact that we now are back to buying oil from our adversaries. We're buying it from friends and adversaries. So we're back to buying oil from the Saudis, which we did not have to do under Trump, buying oil from the Russians, in essence financing the war in Ukraine for them, even buying oil potentially from the Chinese. At the same time, Trump had the Russian pipeline turned off. Now, under Biden, it's turned back on. So I would argue that the policies of this administration, the anti-fossil fuel policies of this administration, have led to the gas prices. I drove from Fort Lauderdale to Ocala, Florida on Saturday, and it actually cost me $100 to fill my tank. People keep saying $6 gas. I don't know where that is. Gas here in the part of Florida where I live is 6 and change, closer to 7. And that's expensive. $100 to fill your gas tank. That's pretty shocking.
I see. Okay, let's look for someone else to bring up. Let me find him.
I've got somebody ready to go.
Okay, go ahead.
This is from Lily. Lily, whenever you're ready.
Hi. Hello, Mr. Stone.
Your mic is a little bit low. Can you get a
Oh.
little closer?
Yeah, of course. Is that better?
Much better.
Yeah, I'm horrible in British. I apologize. So my question was, you were once quoted as saying, "By night, I'm trafficking in the dark arts. Nixon's people are obsessed with intelligence." So with the advent of scandals such as like Cambridge Analytica and other data mining, analysis, and brokerage, do you think your role in the Nixon campaign helped shape this political landscape we're currently seeing? And as a follow-on, do you think the advent of these new ways of accessing so much data, how do you think it's changed the landscape, and how do you intend to navigate that new landscape?
Well, let's take this in parts. Nixon's, the people around Nixon were fueled by a paranoia that I think was born out of the tactics that were used on them in the 1960 election. John and Robert Kennedy played rough. There's evidence that Nixon himself was wiretapped in 1960. There is no question that organized crime played a substantial role in the very, very narrow election of John Kennedy. I've documented this in my book, The Rise and Fall and Rise of Richard M. Nixon. It's also extremely well documented in a multi-part series in the Chicago Tribune, the Herald Tribune, which you cannot find online, but I was able to find in microfiche. And therefore that bred in them a unnecessary paranoia. They had this appetite for intelligence, regardless of how completely worthless the intelligence or gossipy the intelligence might be. I don't know anything about Cambridge Analytica. I've read about it. You might check in with Steve Bannon on that. I know nothing about it. I do think that there are
I don't
available,
disagree with you, Changebox.
from public sources.
We'll turn him down a little more.
An extraordinary number
I don't disagree.
of data points.
He sure likes
every
to talk
single
about how he
individual.
doesn't like what he
And
does all the
therefore,
time.
Through modeling,
It's interesting.
and using entirely publicly available data, you can select.
There we go.
and
Take
therefore
that.
Target
Now you
for
guys should be able to
messaging
hear me better.
individual voters.
Welcome in, Quack
So
Quack.
This
Good to
brings
see
a
you.
level of sophistication to politics that we never had previously. Now you add to that the extraordinary efficiency, but also the inexpensive nature of the internet and text messaging, I might add. And those things, I think, have changed our politics very, very dramatically. What does it mean? Well, if you were a woman and you wanted to run for Congress in, say, Dallas or New York or Philadelphia, it would be prohibitively expensive because the most efficient method of communications would be network television, and network television advertising in those markets cost an enormous amount of money. Therefore, only people who had personal wealth or people who could get extraordinary wealth from special interests were able to be viable as candidates. The advent of social media, particularly Facebook, the sophistication in which we can identify and reach people through internet, through email, through text messages, I think has brought down the costs dramatically of being able to run a sophisticated, viable campaign for state or federal office. And therefore, I consider it to be a positive development.
I see. Well, I'm happy to say we have around 5,000 listeners right now, 500 here, and there's a lot of big streamers streaming. There's a spam train going on in the chat right now saying Stone 2024. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Stone? Have you ever thought about a presidential run, or are you just going to stick to the political consultant and advisor man behind the shadows? If you're talking, we can't hear you. I think your audio cut out.
Yeah, maybe you knocked him off his chair with that question.
I think so. I shot him a text.
Okay.
There he's back. Did you hear the question, Mr. Stone?
I did not. Everything just went completely blank. So start over again.
Well, I said, first, we're happy to inform that we have around 5,000 people listening. We have 500 here, and a few thousand are being streamed elsewhere on other platforms. But there's a spam train going on in the discussion chat saying Stone 2024. What is your response to that? People are encouraging you to run for office in 2024.
I believe me, I am not running for office. I have more skeletons in the graveyard. So I have politics is for a certain type of person, someone who suffers fools gladly. I really don't do that. I'm also not interested in government. I'm interested in the science of electing people to office. I do encourage people who are dissatisfied with their government today to consider running for office. I do think that until you've been elected, until you've helped elect somebody sheriff, you can't understand how to elect a U.S. senator or even a president. And I do think that there is some value in starting at the bottom, but I have no intention of being a candidate for public office anytime soon. I thank those people for their support, however.
This is a pleasure to talk to you, Mr. Storn. I wanted to ask you, are we ever getting Roger Storn merch? I've been wanting to have a Roger Storn Did Nothing t-shirt for a very long time.
We've had some supply chain oriented problems, but my advice to you would be to go to rogerstonestore.com, rogerstonestore.com. That is one way. The other way is to go to my website, stonecoldtruth.com, and go to the shop there. And t-shirts available in both places. And I think they are back in stock. Like many people in many industries, we too have had trouble getting the actual t-shirt. So the problem is not applying the art to the t-shirt. The problem is getting the t-shirt itself. But I'm told everything is now back in stock, and wear it in good health.
Excellent. Awesome. There's also mugs as well. You can set the liberators and the
There are stones. I've signed a stone with my first name, Roger. That makes it a Roger Stone. It's a paperweight. I sold more than 15,000 of these to finance my my legal defense. You can get a signed copy of the presidential pardon that the president gave me. You can get a copy of the photo of me being arrested. It's particularly enjoyable now because the FBI agent who arrested me is now under investigation himself for having changed documents fraudulently in the indictments of Carter Page and George Papadopoulos. So you can get any of those items. Also my book, Stone's Rules, available at stonecoldtruth.com in the store, as well as my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, the case against LBJ. My book on the Bush crime family is temporarily out of print.
Why not?
I'm
Right,
arguing
Quack?
with the publisher that they should reissue it. I'm hopeful that that will happen soon.
Awesome. I believe you're going to be giving Abraham. You're going to be giving away some copies of Stone's Rules too.
Yes,
correct?
I was just going to mention that. So at the end of this AMA, I'm going to be giving away 10 free copies of that. Well, free to you, but I'm gonna I'll get you guys free copies of that. And Roger, if you will, do us the pleasure of signing those, that'd be amazing.
I would be more than happy to do that.
So I'm gonna pull on the next person. This is his name is Steven, goes by Destiny Online. He's another one of these really large, very popular, very famous political streamers.
It's Destiny.
And
Look,
he had a couple questions for you.
I'm on the same stream.
Steven,
as him.
whenever you're ready.
Technically, we're on the
Hey,
same
Roger. Just curious, when you look at all of the kind of electioneering stuff that you're involved in, you talk about how you're in the science of electing people. Do you ever think at the end of the day, like morally, like any of the consequences of the people that you've gotten elected, has any of it turned out to where you either regret working for somebody or you're really happy, like morally with how something turned out, or do you just not even factor that in? Or you're there to win, move on to the next thing, and you don't really care one way or another what happens?
No, in fact, I have written extensively about the fact that I was never a Bush Republican. I was called into the recount uh, for the election of George W. Bush. I was opposed to the Iraq War. I think the Iraq War was an enormous mistake. I think the reasons that we were given for the Iraq War were false. Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11. Saddam Hussein did not have yellow cake uranium.
That's part of the
Those
point.
are all falsifications by Dick
He's
Cheney.
he knows
and
how to
other
talk okay.
neocons, and therefore I deeply regret having assisted George W. Bush in becoming president. How's that?
Yeah, I guess that's good. Looking forward to like future stuff. I don't want to take too much time. When you're trying to evaluate future candidates, so obviously like somebody like Donald Trump is incredibly controversial. Are there things that you've learned from past people you've supported where you're like, this is a red flag? Even if I seem like I like this guy, I'm not going to support him because I'm worried that it might go bad in the future. Not necessarily for you, but just in terms of what you would like, the direction you'd like to see the country head.
Well, look, Trump is a unique individual, and on paper, he should not have been electable. Normally speaking, when a candidate is extraordinarily polarizing, they're harder to elect. In this particular case, Hillary Clinton turned out to be every bit as polarizing as Donald Trump. But Trump's unfavorable rating exceeded his favorable rating among voters on the day he was elected president. I've never seen that before. That's a new phenomena. Generally speaking, you want candidates who have an overwhelmingly favorable rating, and you obviously need candidates with access to resources. It is a sad fact that the cost of political advertising is astronomical. Whether it be cable or radio, which are still the most efficient and dominant forms of communications. This has been leavened, as I said earlier, somewhat by the internet, by social media, which is less expensive, but also less efficient. So we've never elected a president before who wasn't a governor or a senator or a general. So there's yet another rule that has been broken. So I guess the rule is there really are no rules. I think anything is possible in America today. I do think that there's a cross-pollination of pop culture and our politics, and therefore somebody, let's take Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example, who is known because they're an entertainer, or in his case, an athlete, if you will, makes the transition easily to politics. And therefore, the greatest single quality for a man or woman who wants to run for public office is being well known, is starting off as well known. This was Trump's greatest advantage going into 2016. He was certainly running against people with substantially more experience than he had at the art of politics, of the game of politics. But the enormous advantage he had is because of years and years and years of self-promotion, he was extremely well known and he was a known commodity. Whereas if you went out in the street in front of your house right now and you ask the first three people who you know who Marco Rubio is, they're going to tell you they have no idea, despite the fact that he's running for his third term, I guess, in the U.S. Senate. So it is,
Do you guys have any idea on a question?
Pop
I'm
culture
gonna get
and our
asked in a second.
politics
I can
is
feel it in my
significant
bones.
and becoming extremely well known. If you don't have resources, is very difficult to do, and therefore viability is very tough to achieve.
Okay. If I can do one final one, I guess, real quick.
Sure.
Have you ever approached a candidate that you wanted to support, but because of your background, you're so controversial, they didn't want to work with you? Is there like a way that you overcame that, or do you don't care and you just move on, or are you so effective that your reputation doesn't really hamper your ability to work with other campaigns?
Well, I mean, there's a distinction there. There's a difference between support and work for. In other words, I have worked as a political strategist and what they call a GC, a general consultant. I'm making most of my living today writing and speaking and analyzing politics. I'm helping a few candidates, but that's a very, very difficult and competitive business. It's not what I choose to do at this point in my life. I'm entitled to support anybody I want. Support it as in vote for, support as in say on social media that I support candidates. I have never had a situation in which I pursued a potential client and got turned down. What you see is what you get. That's really not what I'd prefer to be doing right now. As I said, I prefer to talk about it, write about it, analyze it, and so on.
Thank you so much.
Are we ready for Steve? I'll bring him up here then. Let me find him.
Oh, there's another Steve. Okay.
Keto.
I think he's coming. I found him. There you are.
Hey, Roger. I had just a couple quick questions. First off, I was wondering if you had anything like Telegram or your own Discord or anything that we could possibly join.
I definitely have a lively feed on Telegram. I have a lively feed on Gab. I have a lively feed on Truth Social. I, of course, am banned for life on Twitter, banned for life on Facebook, banned for life on Instagram because I'm obviously the most dangerous person in the world. Taliban's not banned, but I'm banned. But you can follow me in any of those places. By the way, I love the Tim Curry avatar. Very cool.
Thank you. I was wondering if also you could comment about this. Now, I agree with President Trump about almost everything, but there's one thing about him that really disturbs me, and I wanted to get your opinion about it. He eats his steaks cooked well and with ketchup.
He's memeing.
It's an abomination,
This is
isn't it?
memeing.
It's an abomination.
It is.
Meme.
So I have a wager with him over a certain election. I won't say specifically which one, but an upcoming primary. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll bet you a steak dinner at Bedminster. And I said, I'll tell you what, let's make it meatloaf. Because I know he will not only order his steak well done, but also order mine well done.
That's great.
That's an abomination. By the way, the meatloaf at Bedminster or at Mar-a-Lago is extraordinary, if you're a fan of such things, and I am.
So, being an advisor to Trump, have you ever communicated this with him about how he's committing a food crime, basically, every time he eats a steak? Have you ever tried to, like, for your public image, you need to eat your steaks differently?
I have to admit to you that I haven't, but anytime you're with Donald Trump, he does most of the talking and you do most of the listening. He's a man of strong opinions. He has particularly strong opinions about food. As I'm sure you know, he loves McDonald's. He loves Kentucky Fried Chicken. He loves Burger King. I would not eat in any of those places. I'm pretty careful about my diet. I like to live to a ripe old age. On the other hand, I knew both of Donald's parents. They lived in and were vital into their middle 90s. And he has an extraordinary amount of stamina when you consider that even when he plays golf, he rides in the cart. And his diet is, shall we say, not what I would choose. So he does function on 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. Pretty amazing in itself. And he has an enormous amount of physical energy and stamina, considering how disastrous his diet is.
That's great, sir. Thank you.
And we'll post the Telegram and the links and whatnot in the announcements, right, Abe? We'll get that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's an interesting thing. I have 19,000 followers and change in Telegram.
So
That
some
number
doobie lore
never
for you
ever
guys.
changes.
Doobie's
it never
name.
goes up. It never goes down.
Hey.
It just kind of hangs right there. And I find
Bet you
that
guys
really,
didn't know
really
that,
odd.
did you?
When I do post there, I'll get 1,000, 2,000, sometimes 3,000. Somehow as many as 6,000 people will read what I post. So I can't explain whether I am shadow banned or why I seem to get no new followers at Telegram. My friend Laura Loomer says every time she gets to 35,000, they will almost all get erased and she starts back at 0 again, which is very, very odd. But anybody who wants to keep up with what I'm up to, I welcome you to follow me on Telegram.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Steve. So I've got a question from another streamer friend of mine. His name is Max. It's Max. As soon as I can find you, I'll pull you in. There you are. Okay, Max, whenever you're ready.
Hi, Roger.
Greetings.
It's Max, guys.
I was wondering if I could actually ask you for some advice, kind of political, personal advice. Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I am hated, not so widely as you, but perhaps as deeply. I've been arrested, I've been banned, I've been suspended, everything. A lot of the same things as you. I'm very provocative, and I'm wondering. I think it's easier to provoke anger or hate, to turn people against each other or against yourself, as I have done, and I think you will need to hear to reduce polarization rather than increase it. If there's something, if you can use your political craftsmanship to come up with the narrative that people need to hear to kind of disarm.
It's a difficult question. I mean, I will certainly concede that I'm hated. I'm also loved. 85,000 individual Americans contributed to my legal defense fund. I spoke to 700 people in Ocala this weekend. I spoke to 3,000 people in Myrtle Beach not long ago. Very happy to have my presentation. So kind of goes with the territory. I don't think that there is any one uniting message that will unite everybody, because I think we are so polarized that some in the political landscape are not interested in just defeating their opponents in an election, but they want to destroy them, want to incarcerate them and destroy them. When I lived in Washington, D.C., and when I was working as a political consultant solely, I had many, many, many friends who were Democrats, but in the same business I was. And we would socialize together, we would eat together, we would drink together, we would hang out together, we would smoke dope together, we would tease each other, but it was all very good-natured, and there was a certain civility, even though we disagreed. That has disappeared entirely from politics today. And those who are in both parties despise each other. More importantly, they want to destroy each other. And it's the politics of personal destruction. It is not what I have practiced, generally speaking, unless someone's crimes are so manifest that it's kind of obvious. So I don't have an answer for you. I don't know what kind of I don't know what you were arrested for to begin with, but I wish you well in your endeavors. Although people may hate you, many people may love you. As Nixon, I think, famously said, people may hate you, but you don't lose unless you hate them back. And I think that's a pretty good rule right there.
Yeah, well, according to the chat, he's an advocate supporter for the documentary Cuties, so that perhaps may be one of the reasons, but absolutely on that advice standpoint. So I think we're ready for the next question.
Yeah, we. I think you'll have a follow-up question that we can circle around to later, if that's okay.
Again, I've lost the sound.
Oh, can you not hear us? Testing, testing.
Uh-oh.
No, I don't think you can hear.
I hope we don't lose him.
You might want to shoot him
Just
a
give,
task.
just give him a second. It'll come back, I think.
While he's getting his set back up, I'm gonna pull Max back in because I think he had a follow up. That should be pretty good. So give me a second, Max.
All right, we're back.
Awesome. Okay, give me just 2 seconds. I'm gonna pull Max back in really quickly. Go for it.
Hello. Yeah, I was arrested for basically writing articles that were offensive to liberals at my college, the University of Colorado. But my follow-up question.
I didn't know that was a chargeable offense, but
It's not. The charges were dropped, but it was. I was arrested for interference with faculty, staff, and students of an educational institution. Also because I said we should empathize with mass shooters. Kind of going with what you were saying of not hating your opponents.
I have no empathy for mass shooters, but I am a believer in the First Amendment, meaning I believe every individual has the right to express their view, no matter how repugnant or disgusting or distasteful or vile it may be. You do have a right to say it. Doesn't mean the rest of us have to accept it or like it. But that's the way the Constitution works.
I'm sure you're starting to get a feel for some of these internet characters. They have some very diverse beliefs. Doobie, are you ready to bring someone else in?
Sure. I think Max should have an actual question he wanted to ask. So we'll try it one more time, if that's okay. So yeah, Max, with your questions, should I put you on pretty please?
Sorry, I keep getting disconnected. I think Ben keeps kicking me out. But anyway, my last question is, if you could turn all those haters into lovers now, and be the uncontroversial Roger Stone, loved by all. I know this is what I want for myself. Would you do it?
No,
If you could do it
because
without selling out.
The only thing worse in politics than being wrong is being boring. And I think that being boring, you would never make your mark. So I'm not seeking to be loved. I am seeking to be respected. Those who hate me, I would kind of urge them to look in the Bible under Hebrews 10:30 through 31. Vengeance is reserved for the Lord. The old Roger Stone would be lying in wait, trying to decide how to get revenge on those who I believe have wronged me. I've forgiven those who wronged me. I've completely forgiven them. They will have to face God someday, in my opinion. But there's you burn up too many calories in hate. There's too much brain damage. I hate no one at this point. As some of you may know, my wife of 30 years has just had a horrific battle with stage 4 cancer. I am epically grateful that she's now fine, that she has beaten cancer, that she's in full remission. Something has to be watched very, very carefully. Therefore, I'm grateful to the millions of people who prayed for us, for the millions of Buddhists who chanted for us. My wife is a Buddhist, by the way.
Roger, I will. The last thing.
Yep.
I watched the documentary about you on Netflix.
Yep.
It's very clear that your family loves you, but I do not think that they think you're boring. So I disagree. I think they think you're interesting and they love you.
Well, that's certainly true. I thank you for your questions.
Thank you for your answers. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Max. I've got someone else lined up, unless you want to pull someone else in bed. Ben?
You can bring in the next person, actually.
Cool. Okay. Next person up is Buddy, another streamer friend of mine. Very intelligent person. Buddy, whenever you're ready.
Can you guys hear me there?
Any second now, buddy.
Okay, I don't know if you guys
I think you
can.
might pass out. That's okay. So next up, we'll go to a question that I had actually. I'm gonna steal a spot for myself. The question is, oh wait, there he is.
There's Buddy.
I'm so very sorry about that. I was opening a pop-up and the invite didn't pop up for myself. Roger, it's an absolute pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to you. I was really curious about when Trump first made the decision or came to the decision to start to run. How did the initial conversation with you go? Did you approach him? Did he approach you? How did this decision go? And how was the initial campaign formed? Like, how did this transformation, so to speak, occur? Or did he more come to you with, these are my ideas, and you facilitate a way for this to be a possibility?
I first suggested that Trump might want to run for president as early as 1988 because he expressed a dissatisfaction with the choice then between George H.W. Bush and Michael Dukakis. I tried again in 2000 to get him to consider running for president, this time as an independent or candidate of the Reform Party. I tried again in 2012 to get him to challenge Mitt Romney, for whom I have a very low regard, and I was unsuccessful. But the thing you have to understand about Trump is that he's not a politician. He's a political figure. He's also very, very, very much his own man. He makes his own decisions. No one puts words in his mouth. He eschewed using a speechwriter. He eschewed using a teleprompter until the very end of his campaign. He does it his way. If you have an opinion, he'll listen to you, but you don't have, for example, the kind of reliance that, say, George W. Bush had on Karl Rove, or the kind of reliance that Barack Obama had on his Chicago-based consultants. The chief name escapes me at the moment. So Trump does things his way and in his way, and no one puts words in his mouth. He's not managed. He's not controlled. He's not handled. So, for example, in his announcement after he came down the escalator, his comments about our southern border and about the immigration problem, that was a surprise to all of us. That was not something that was planned. It was not something that was suggested. That was all Donald Trump.
How very interesting. Kind of an orthogonal question, if you don't mind. If someone was to want to get more involved with politics, a friend of mine, so to speak, is interested, is there any recommendation you might give an average Joe that wanted to try to make a change in the world in how to do that?
Yeah, if a man or a woman wants to get in politics, the best way is to go volunteer to work on the campaign of an individual that you support at any level, whether it's the county commission or the state senate or the state house or a campaign for Congress or a campaign for the U.S. Senate or ultimately a campaign for president. But the best way to get involved is to volunteer and get to see the process up close.
Very good. Again, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank Abe for putting this whole thing together. And thank you very much, Roger, for your service to the country and to all of us, really.
Thank you.
Oops, I left too far.
But if someone were to consult you about making a bet on if President Trump will decide to run or not, would you tell them to bet their money that he will or bet their money that he will not?
Today I say it's even money.
Okay.
I think it's a 50-50 proposition. I think he's, based on my conversation, he's inclined to do it. I think he wants to do it. But in politics, a year is a lifetime. In politics, a month is a lifetime. And we can't possibly know what the political situation will be 6 months from now. I read in yesterday's New York Post that Joe Biden says he's running for re-election. I kind of doubt that. but I could also be wrong. So if you were forced to place a bet, not that you know anything about betting, Ben, but if you did, I'd call it even money.
Okay. I would think minus 150, but I'll take that one.
Okay. So next person up, so I can find them here. Got a question about the education system in the United States. Okay, whenever you're ready, go for it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stone, for answering questions today. I wanted to ask, what is your opinion on the concepts of gender identity, gender role, and sexual orientation, which were created by a man known as John?
Well, that was very interesting, folks. This is going to be an
Hey,
interesting
well, I'm going to
question,
assume
I
that
guess.
that was a comedy special
Yeah,
question.
I think he might have benefited from more of the education system in the United States.
That seemed like a prank question to me.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Sorry about that.
I didn't move him in. I think let's bring in Polish, who's I don't know his first name, but I know that he's a stone cold conservative as far as I know, so I think he'll ask a real question.
Hi, how are you doing, Mr. Stone?
Excellent. Good evening.
My question is more about geopolitics, and I was wondering if you think that Joe Biden bears the responsibility for the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and one more question. Would you believe that Ukraine would be capable of winning the war against Russia? Thank you.
I think that we are drowning in war propaganda. Anybody who thinks that the Ukrainians are kicking the shit out of the Russians has no idea what's really going on. I am not pro-Russian or pro-Putin. The Russian system is a brutal, authoritarian society. I myself have had members of my own family mowed down by Russian tanks in Budapest in 1956. That said, the reasons for the war in Ukraine are not what we're being told by this administration or by most of the media. In 1994, we signed a treaty with Boris Yeltsin representing the Russia, in which we agreed that we would not expand NATO to Ukraine. Let me define that more closely. That we would not seek to place offensive missiles aimed at Russia in Ukraine. We are doing exactly that today. The silos for those missiles are already built. Max Blumenthal, who's a left-wing progressive but anti-war nonetheless, has done some of the best reporting on this. If you just simply listen to what Putin has been saying, he cannot afford to prop up a puppet government in Ukraine. He doesn't have the economic strength to afford that. That's not his goal. We now know yesterday the Defense Department finally admitted that we have as many as 46 bioweapons labs operating in Ukraine. The Russians do not want our bioweapons labs and whatever the hell it is that they are cooking up, and they do not want offensive missiles pointed at Russia. Consequently, I believe that if the Ukrainians would agree not to do those two things, that this matter could be settled. One other point. Ukraine is not a democracy. Stop saying that it is. After the last presidential election, Zelensky arrested the guy who ran second, arrested all the leaders of his party, and shut down the television stations that were critical of his campaign and his presidency. So this is an authoritarian regime, just like Russia. The loss of life is tragic. I think this would never have happened had Donald Trump been president. I do think that Ukraine has been a center for money laundering, has been a center for child sex trafficking. And I ask this obvious question. If you voted in the U.S. Senate to give $40 billion to Ukraine, why would you be opposed to having a U.S. Inspector General keep track of exactly where that money was going? who could vote against that, Republican or Democrat? I would think that that would be an obvious yes vote. Yet when Rand Paul proposed that, it was voted down in the Senate, meaning that people don't want to know where that money is going. When we have 370,000 homeless veterans in this country, when we have a shortage of baby formula, when we have the kind of abject poverty that we have in some places in this country, I don't know how you justify giving $40 billion to Ukraine, most of which I'm virtually certain will be stolen. Reading today's New York Post and the New York Times for that matter, they tell us that the Ukrainians are running out of bullets. They're running out of armaments. Well, how can that be? We just wrote them a $40 billion check. So I think that this war is illicit. No, I'm not a Putin lover. I don't love the Russians. They're every bit as authoritarian as, I don't know, the Ukrainians. But this could have been solved through diplomacy, and it has not been.
Just reading a question from another user, and this user is named Jerry. He wants to know, who do you think is more corrupt, the Biden crime family or the Clinton crime family?
I've written a book on the Clinton crime family. They are epically corrupt. Bill and Hillary would, of course, steal a hot stove. On the other hand, the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop, which 31 current or former intelligence officers, including the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, insisted was Russian disinformation, turns out to be all completely accurate. I think that there needs to be a formal investigation to determine the answer to that question.
Awesome. So I've got somebody else. This is Kyla. She's another streamer. She's been streaming the AMA for all of her fans. Kyla, whenever you're ready.
Hi, Mr. Stone. I was listening, talking with Max. You mentioned that you used to be a hateful person, but you're not that way anymore. Are you kind of telling us that like you've changed?
I've most definitely changed. Having a near-death experience caused me to have a redemption in Jesus Christ. I'm not perfect, and that's for sure. And it is very easy to, particularly if you're Sicilian as I am, to get your ire up. But I try to be a better person. I try to disagree. I can be a little pungent, but at this juncture in my life, I don't hate anybody.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess I'm just wondering then as well, what would be the steps that you would recommend to somebody who's having a major life change, kind of going forward? How do they enact those changes in their life?
Prayer. I mean, you can say that's, and a lot of elites will do this. They'll say, oh, that's a head fake. That's positioning. That's some kind of dirty trick by Roger Stone. That's not sincere. Look, I was looking at 7 to 9 years in prison in what I believe was a Soviet-style show trial. I most definitely did not lie to Congress to hide any Russian collusion, because there is no Russian collusion to hide. And that was a death sentence at 68 years old, and with a lifetime history of asthma.
It's amazing.
I would have
I do know
died,
most
and
of
I'd
these
probably
people,
already be dead. And therefore, it is only through the power of prayer that I survived. President Donald Trump, pardon me, commuted my sentence in an election year over intense opposition from some around him directly. So from my point of view, the Lord delivered me from my persecutors. And I really
Lord
seriously
Donald
used to think that the
Delivered
Bible was an antiquated, archaic, irrelevant historical document. It really didn't tell you much.
Well, not
Part of the
new
problem was
version.
that I was trying to read this
They
old
wrote that in like the
King
50s or
James
something.
version of the Bible, and the
See?
language is very, very archaic and obtuse. It's hard to understand what they were trying to communicate. I read a Daily Walk Bible today that has a lot of annotations, a lot of explanations
Yeah.
of the original
They fill the
writing.
blanks in for you.
I find it very comforting.
I think it's neat, based
yes,
on the
I do believe in the
conversation we
power
were having
of prayer.
before.
I think it is prayer that has saved my wife's life. The doctors did not give her much chance of survival. She's doing extraordinarily well. So I consider myself blessed. Others
Okay,
can
I don't want to
choose
slag anybody's religion,
another course.
but man, oh
I
man,
indicated earlier
how
that my wife is a
amazing.
Buddhist.
How
She
amazing.
finds great comfort in Buddhism. Buddhism is a philosophy rather than a religion. But each individual person, I think, has to kind of find their own way.
I have a quick question as well. Mr. Stone, you're a big advocate. I know you love pizza and whatnot. You're a strong hater of Chicago deep dish pizza, which sort of hurts my feelings. But where would you say is the best place that you have ever gone to get pizza?
I'm a big aficionado of a place called John's of Bleecker Street in New York City. It's a very unique form of pizza. But if I had to name the best in the country, it would either be, and these are arch rivals, both of them are in New Haven, Connecticut. That is the mecca of great pizza. Worcester Street, it used to be the old Italian section. And there are two pizzerias that have been there since the 20s, Frank Pepe's and Sally's. They're directly across from each other. They are the same style. It's a specific Connecticut style of pizza. It's called New Haven style pizza. I would recommend either one of them. Strangely enough, I recently located a pizzeria in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a place you would not think would be extraordinary, called Andiamo's Pizza, that is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, absolutely must be checked out. I am an aficionado of great pizza. When I travel, I always ask the local people, what's the best pizza in town? And I try it. Now, pizza is a very subjective thing, as you know. Some people like it thicker, some people like it thinner, some people like more cheese, some people like less cheese. You're right, I'm not an aficionado of the Chicago style because it's a little too bready for me. But pizza's like sex. Even when it's bad, still pretty good.
It's a Stone's rule.
Awesome. So I've got someone else. This is another streamer friend of mine. We've got a lot of political streamers and just streamers in general listening to the AMA, hearing me have to say, streaming it for all their fans. Zonia, whenever you're ready. You just need to accept the invite in the stage. Any second now. I don't think it's gonna work. Okay.
Will this be the last streamer? I think
We've got a bunch of them, actually. I think there are like 3 more.
Well, try to get more of the average person, you know,
There's
in
Zonia.
here
There we
Weird.
as well.
It pops the invite up in the background when you got the thing popped out. Anyways, hey, thanks. Hey, Roger. So, yeah, I'm probably gonna get in trouble for just being on here. I've been getting a lot of crap from people about this, but I'm gonna take one out of the old Roger Stone playbook and just embrace the villain role. Here's my question. So, well, there's a little bit of a preamble to it, but you've been quite open about disinformation being a powerful tool that you leverage. And
Juan,
there's no
I know
secret
which
that
one you are.
disinformation has long been
Hi.
at the heart of U.S. politics. But prior to you being more openly embracing and advocating for its use, there was sort of like an overall facade of decency that the American political body tried to foster, regardless of the sincerity of that facade. And I know that between you and some others, uh, like Karl Rove, for instance, you were both sort of pioneers of being a little bit more openly unapologetic about using tactics like yours, and eventually becoming sort of trendsetters in the Republican Party as well as the modern era of lobbying firms. And I know that that was also tried to be played down for a while by the Republican Party until, as time went on, little by little, they stopped really hiding it. Even today, the Democratic Party is not really doing so much to hide their own use of the same tactics, right? And so now I get that, like, the game is the game. Whatever you can fit within the confines of the law is technically fair play. But growing up through several decades now of kind of watching the political landscape evolve, I can see what is just this very obvious, continually growing, compounding confusion, distrust, paranoia, and hostility for our entire political landscape. And so I just only kind of see this getting worse. And what I'm kind of wondering is like, is this manufacturing a sort of chaos that will continually erode the people's faith in being represented by any politician at all and exacerbate division among the people? And if so, are do you have any concerns about your own role in that? And does it bother you? Or do you have faith or hope that at some point we'll find a sane equilibrium?
I hardly invented the genre. Last night, CNN had a special on, Sunday night on Watergate. I've written a book on the subject. I found 29 absolute falsehoods in an hour. It was that easy. So, truth is in the eye of the beholder. They would tell you everything they said was true. I've written 2 books on the subject. I know a number of things they said were flatly untrue. Back in the day of Abraham Lincoln, it was alleged in handbills that he was of mixed race. So this idea that Karl Rove, who I'm not much of a fan of, or that I invented disinformation, not true. Your boys will not be sent to any foreign wars. Franklin Roosevelt said that. If you like your current doctor, you can keep your current doctor under our plan. Barack Obama said that. Read my lips. No new taxes. George H.W. Bush said that. So there's a long. I did not have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. Bill Clinton said that. So this is the world we live in. It's a pop culture world. Who's the arbiter of truth? Certainly not CNN. Virtually nothing they report is true. I don't get my news from CNN. The same reason I don't eat out of the toilet. It is mostly fraudulent. It is overwhelmingly fake. I'm not saying, by the way, that this is a black and white situation. So I'm not arguing that everything you see on Fox News is a factual. But in a society in which, thanks to the First Amendment, at least to a certain extent, each individual is free to say whatever they want, and almost everyone believes that their opinion is the truth, then I would say the greatest single danger to our democracy is censorship. If you're not advocating hurting someone else, and you're not exploiting, children for sex, then I don't see why you should be banned on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram and so on. But the thought police are censoring people. Democracy dies in darkness, the Washington Post tells us. Okay, good. When will Nancy Pelosi release the 1,400 hours of video footage of what happened on January 6th? How come they don't editorialize about that? So no, I'm not going to take the rap for our current devolution of discourse, other than to say I think it started long before I came along.
Awesome. Thank you, Roger. Thank you,
We're
Sam.
we're gonna go ahead and bring in a Stone Cold Patriot, who goes by the name of Bear or Geo. So here he is, and hopefully he has a good question for us today.
Hey, Roger. All right, so first, big thanks to Benjamin for setting this up.
A bear.
It's been a
Nice
lot
to
of
meet the
information.
bear.
But my question is, how have you built up such a big clientele and made it up with such a early on in your political career, you made it up with the big shots as Nixon, Reagan, and now Trump?
It's kind of one thing led to another. So I grew up in a non-political family. Neither one of my parents went to college. They were both high school graduates. My father had a blue-collar job. He was a well digger. He used an old-fashioned chop drill to drill artesian water wells for people. My mother worked as a part-time local newspaper reporter, but she was largely a homemaker. My parents had no interest in politics by and large, although they voted. I think they were nominally Republicans, but because John Kennedy was our first Catholic candidate for president, I think they probably voted for him. And I had, at that juncture, to the extent that I had any aspiration, I wanted to be an actor. And then in 1964, or 63 really, the woman who lived next door to us gave me a book called Conscience of a Conservative, which outlined a philosophy of personal freedom, small government, and maximum personal freedom. And I became interested in politics. And I became a 12-year-old but avid supporter of Senator Barry Goldwater in his campaign for president, in which, of course, he was decimated. After that, I began looking backwards and reading more about politics, and I began to study the 1960 election. I decided that I thought Nixon had been cheated out of victory by John Kennedy. I would later write a book about that, much later. But then I just sat down and I wrote Nixon a letter. He was practicing law in New York City. It wasn't hard to get the name of the law firm where he was practicing. I wrote him a letter telling him that I thought he'd been cheated out of the presidency, and that if he ever ran again, I wanted to be involved. He wrote back a letter, I still have it, which he said no, he was essentially finished with politics, but that if he changed his mind, he would be in touch. Of course, he was not finished with politics, and 2 full years later, I was contacted by one of his assistants, asked me if I was still interested in helping in the campaign. I said yes. I took the train into New York City for an interview, and they were in shock because I was 16 years old. They thought I was an adult. But I did get a job in 1968, essentially as a gopher. I worked out of the New York headquarters, delivering packages, going out for coffee, picking people up at the train station and bringing them to the office and so on. And in that incarnation, I got to see, some of the most important people in the political realm come and go. Nelson Rockefeller, Ronald Reagan, Everett Dirksen, William F. Buckley Jr., Billy Graham, and so on. It was a great experience. Then, because of those relationships, I went to college in Washington, D.C. I got a job in Nixon's reelection in 1972. I was 19. I was the youngest member of his reelection staff. I parlayed that into a job with the 76 Reagan campaign because Nixon and Reagan were both from Southern California. There's a great commonality in their staff members, also in their donors. The 76 campaign led me to my job in Reagan's 1980 campaign, in which I met Donald Trump. Led me to my job in Reagan's 1980 campaign. That parlayed into my job in the 1980 Donald Trump campaign. Then into my job in the 1984 campaign. Then that led me to work in the U.S. Senate for Senator Bob Dole. And of course, I had met Trump back in the Reagan days, began urging him to become a candidate for president. So I guess what I would say is one job or one opportunity led to another. Had I never written that letter as a 12-year-old at that point, I would never have had a career in American politics.
Everywhere.
Awesome. Thanks for that answer. Next up, we've got Marco. Marco, whenever you're ready. You just need to accept the invitation.
I want pizza. Roger Stone should share his pizza.
Hello.
I'm hungry.
Stone, and thank you to Abraham and Benjamin for realizing this AMA. Sir, my question is, among the Republican politicians whom you worked with as a consultant, who would you say was the most tractable to deal with, and who was rather more biddable than the others? And I would say, I'd also ask you who was your favorite politics-wise, because I know that personally wise, maybe it's Nixon because of what you said earlier.
I pulled
he was
a
close to you
sneaky
and your
on you
family, and
guys.
because of that tattoo and all that stuff.
I pulled up someone else's
And
stream
thank you.
audio. So we listen to Area Night, go bibble
It's a
babble.
difficult question because they're all very different.
Haha, I gotcha.
Easiest to work with was Ronald Reagan, because he had come from an experience as an actor. He was very, very focused on his performance. He was not very interested in the nitty-gritty and the small details of politics. As long as you did your job, he left that to you. He was not not very demanding, but he was very focused on his own performance. He was kind of a big picture guy, though. I mean, in other words, he was the master of his own fate. He was controlled by no one else. Nixon was a control freak. He wanted to control all aspects of politics, and therefore somewhat more difficult to deal with, more of a perfectionist. Trump is enormously fun to be with. He has a self-deprecating sense of humor. He is a very good-humored. Never seen him lose his temper. He can be very, very funny. He can be somewhat undisciplined, obviously. Extremely likable. If you force me to choose between the three, they're just very, very different. Reagan and Trump, both extroverts. Nixon, very much an introvert. Reagan and Trump had a certain physicality, a certain presence, a certain size. I don't mean physical size, but I guess I mean a presence, a command focus, as it were. Nixon could be very riveting in a large group, but he was very uncomfortable in a small group. So I can't choose a favorite among them because they're all completely different. But I'm proud to have worked for all of them. With that, Ben, I'm going to ask that we wrap this up because I've had a long day, but I have enjoyed it enormously. For those of you who wanted to shout obscenities at me, I appreciate your fact that you did not do so, and I have enjoyed taking your questions.
Roger, thank you so much for coming along.
Let's do another one
Absolutely.
soon.
Sounds like a plan. And like I said, make sure you guys go get your t-shirts. Go to the gym with a nice Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong hoodie. I'm doing it myself. Get yourself a mug. Go read Stone's Rules. You want to be a Stone Cold winner, you need to read Stone's Rules. StoneColdTruth.com, StoneDefenseFund.com. That's all I have to say. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Mr. Stone, for doing an AMA. It's quite the treat when a person such as your status comes onto the little old politics Discord and takes questions from the people. But people are spamming for you to run for president. I know that you're not going to do that, but you've won over a lot of the hearts of a lot of people. And I think that your conservative libertarianism is perhaps the most effective strategy in politics. And I think that, like I said, I'm just so happy that you made it and took all these questions.
Happy to be here. God bless you.
God bless you. Godspeed.
Talk to you later, Roger. The rest of you, thank you very much for coming along. I am going to be giving away 10 of Roger's books, signed books, at the end of this. So I'm going to ping for how to in the announcements for how to get involved in that giveaway if you guys are interested.
If I will say this, Doobie, in the next one we do, no more catering to the streamers with 4 viewers. We want to hear from the American people, not the redcoats, not the streamers. Also, I have some good news for you, ladies and gentlemen. I've officially been granted immunity on the server, as anybody in my room will also be granted immunity from the biased, radical moderators that take part in this server. God bless you. Godspeed. We will win. Stop the steal. That's all I have to say. Goodbye.
So really quickly, Benjamin. So, this bastard. So hopefully he comes back in. I hope he does. So we're opening up the other channels.
Okay, what's up? I'm back.
Really quick.
What do
So
you
we're
need?
opening up the other channels. So slowly you guys will be able to have access to those things again. And
I think Roger had fun. I think he wants to do another
yeah,
one.
it sounds like he had fun. Yeah, and we can definitely get that scheduled.
Whoever asked that incredibly long question, I know your viewer count's low on Twitch. That was not good. No. But that's all I'd like to say. And we got to make sure, though, Doobie, on a serious note, we appeal to the people, the users, not the streamers, not the special elitists, as you would call them in this field. The people of the server.
Well, here's the thing, though. I think the streamers, Roger talks a lot about getting involved in politics.
Can I say something? Let me just say something. I don't know why Boudicca's husband's adding me to appeal to some females when he's dating a transgender lady. That's not really a good argument. Now, you need to appeal to the people of the server. You need to appeal to the people that make it active. It wasn't 450 streamers.
Okay, it was about 450 active patriotic users and some liberal, and some agreed with Roger. We don't need to hear their long paragraph questions. Nobody cares. Go watch their stream if you want that. We hear them all day, those little weirdos, Vosh, the cutie supporter, Destiny, L, Bozo, plus Ratio. Nobody cares. We will win. We want the people, and we are what makes the server great. That's why I'll never be a mod here, but that's why I represent the Stop the Steal movement. Okay, Doobie? So I'd like you to apologize if you can.
I think you're right. So, in keeping with Stone's rules, Goldie, Benjamin, business is business. Thank you for getting us the AMA.
Well, there's another Stone's rule.
We're not interested in having you on anymore.
There's
the rest of you. I'm going to, like I said, open up the rest of the channel.
Freaking cut him down.
Goldie's banned permanently for being a smug bitch. And yeah, we're gonna move on.
Could you believe
Love you
it?
guys.
I'm gonna ban him for being a smug bitch. Listen to him.
I know a lot of you guys are upset that I just banned him. He won't be unbanned. I think that if you're going to be... I really appreciate him getting us in touch with Roger Stone, but if he's going to use the leverage that gave him to treat people badly, to try to get immunity to say slurs on the server, he can literally suck my whole penis.
The whole thing.
So yeah, there you go.
Good job, Doobie.
And again, in keeping with Roger Stone's other roles, it's better to be infamous than not famous at all. So if you're mad at me, also suck my dick. Unless you're a child, in which case, get your mother to suck my dick. I don't care.
Oh, freaking based! Good job, Doobie. Good job.
Hopefully they have a chin dropper now. Eventually, slowly.
Oh man, that was so very interesting and exciting. What a adventure that was. I think that I'm going to go over to my particular side of the world over here. I'm going to let them do their thing that they were doing, and I'm going to sit right here in my live room. Man, oh man, what an interesting conversation that was. We got to talk to the Monopoly man himself, Roger Stone. Interesting guy. That one person, Benjamin, man, oh man, I don't think he liked me at all. But then again, we cut him off. But then again, how are we going to get Roger Stone back? We'll find out. We'll see how all this works. Apparently, it doesn't really matter. Because again, you got to remember, Doobie's Doobie. And Doobie pulls in all sorts of different folks from all sorts of different routes and paths and plans. Because frankly, that's the way that it works when you're frickin' internet politics frog, I guess. Anyway, we had a lot of fun today. We went to the political shit show. We talked about religion and what that is and what it isn't and where it comes from and why everybody ought to do what someone else thinks that we ought to do. Looks like there was an issue at some point. My stream says I've only been live for 45 minutes. I don't appreciate that very much. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, I'm going to get this, chop it up, cut it into two different things. The interview with Roger Stone, that was quite an interesting thing. I had a lot of fun doing that. Tomorrow we've got our panel where we're talking about money, currency, what it is, how it works, why we do the things that we do with it, and this kind of thing. I'm very excited to, kind of put this thing together. We'll see how that all ends up working. It's an interesting process. We will see. We will see. Anyway, as for the rest of it, I appreciate you all, folks. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see you again very soon. Bye for now.